Are there any Polar Express passengers in need of refreshment?
Santa Claus and ho ho ho.
Where's the Tylenol? Welcome to the party, pal.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Son of a nutcracker!
Papa Gijo.
Dine with us tomorrow.
I'll see you in hell first.
I'll be joining you guys. Welcome to this episode of the Cheap Seat Critics podcast, where we are covering the 2009 animated film A Christmas Carol, continuing our current
Christmas
theming
Carol?
we've been doing. I know. Who would have thunk? It's certainly not I. With me today,
Not
we
me.
have...
Hello, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, a geeky writer.
I'm Crimson Maroon.
And I'm Sprinks. And hey, if you're listening from, boy, what has not been used yet? You know what? Old Joe's shack of sales fence thing. That was terrible.
Yeah.
You can find us on Twitter and TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're over there now too. We have visual stuff over on YouTube and Rumble. If you have a liking to that. We also have a LetterBoxd where we average out all our scores. I believe that's it.
Wonderful. I guess we'll just jump straight into it here, going with our histories, starting with Springs.
Cool. I have seen this movie before, once, and then I saw it for the pod. But being that this came out in 2009, and I don't own a copy of it to my knowledge, and my parents don't own a copy of it, I more than likely saw it in theaters when it came out. And that's the only time I saw it. That's about it.
And
So I was a lot younger, which might go into the reason why I only saw it once.
What about your general Christmas Carol history? For
Oh,
those who
that's
haven't
true.
seen
Those who
those.
only clicked on this one. Hey, Christmas Carol fan here. I've read a good portion of the book. I've seen multiple versions. I have a Marvel Zombies adaptation of Christmas Carol. I have some pop figures of the Muppets one. I have a Scrooge top hat. Yeah. And I'm a big Christmas freak. So
no argument on that one. I guess we'll go with me, the antithesis of Mr. Christmas Freak over here, the anti-Christmas freak. I'm not a big Christmas fan. So
yeah, you're
I've seen
Black Friday music tolerable. December 1st.
yes, can't hear it before Thanksgiving is over, pretty much. But here we are. Christmas Carol. I've seen a few versions at this point, plus some TV show specials like the Doctor Who one,
That's such a good one.
Castle episode. There's lots of TV shows take advantage of this story. It's a classic. And I don't think I have any merchandise regarding Christmas Carol stuff. For this particular version, very similar to Sprinks' story, where I know I've seen it. I have no memory of watching it, really, so I'm going to assume it was theater, but I don't know. And it was almost like watching a whole new movie. There was just like a couple things like, ooh, that some neurons are firing in my brain. Something's happening here. I recognize something. I don't know what, but it's there. So
I didn't. I kind of felt the exact same in bits. I think I remembered 3% of this movie.
Yeah, so it was essentially watching a new movie, but this is technically my second time. Writer.
All right. Well, General Christmas Carol. I've seen the Muppets twice now. Once for the podcast, once on my own. Never saw the George C. Scott. Well, I saw the George C. Scott version for the pod. No, generally I don't. I'm not a Christmas Carol fan. I've seen snippets of them here and there. Never really saw the full film. But to be a parrot for this particular one, saw it in theaters when I was a kid. Didn't remember anything about it. here I am to watch it again for a second time, and my neurons fired occasionally. I'm like, oh, I remember this somehow.
Wow, what a
Wow, we're
similar
all on the
story
same
between
page.
us.
I know.
Weird.
Not to be a parry, but yeah, my experience is exactly the same. I know I saw this in theaters with my mom. I remember it, and I remember thinking it was okay at the time.
Sweet. All right. With history done, we shall jump straight into facts that I found, starting as I usually do with the budget. I didn't find a specific budget. It was kind of a bracket. It's between 175 to 200 million dollars. So a fair amount. Granted, it is a highly detailed animated film. And the box office was 325 million. So they probably made their money back. I don't know how much they spent on advertising. They didn't lose money.
Yeah, I don't remember much marketing. Well, remember any marketing?
I mean, it's
Not
a
really.
Disney film. I'm sure there was something. It's
Yeah,
a
Disney,
big property.
Zemeckis, Christmas came
So
out
I'm
in
sure there was.
late November 2009, so Christmas marketing. Yeah.
Let's see. So Gary Oldman's in this. I know, crazy. And Leslie
once.
Leslie Manville was also in this. They were playing Mr. and Mrs. Cratchit, and they were in real life married from 1987 to 1990. So they played a couple in here, even though at this point when recording they weren't a couple anymore.
Yeah, isn't Leslie now married to Robert Zemeckis?
I don't
As
know
of
that.
now,
I
or
didn't look into that. But that would be interesting. Yeah. Speaking of Robert Zemeckis, he stated that Christmas Carol is one of his favorite time travel stories.
Fair enough. It technically is
That
time
works.
travel. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And if anyone knows time travel, it should be Zemeckis. He's made some of the probably most iconic time travel movies.
He's made
You want?
one of the most iconic time travel movies.
Well, there's
Oh.
3 in that one.
I see.
But I mean, Sprinks, you're more knowledgeable on the guy. You want to do some shout outs of his work?
Oh, yeah. Well, his most recent thing he did was here, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm wanting to. He did Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Castaway, Polar Express.
Yeah, lots of big things.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I believe, was Zemeckis.
All right. An interesting history fact I learned when doing research for this, which was pretty interesting. During the opening credits, flying through Old London, there's the second London Bridge, which in 1938 was 12 years old, and remained in London for another 124 years before it was dismantled and sold to an American in 1967, and it now crosses Bridgewater Channel in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Probably pronounced that wrong, but I had no idea that there was a London Bridge purchased and put in America. That's pretty cool.
Interesting. I just want to say, Sprinks, you
Huh.
forgot one of the important films by Robert Zemeckis that we actually covered on the podcast. Mars Needs Moms.
Oh, boy. He didn't direct it.
Yeah, he's got a hand in it, though.
Yes.
Oh, well, I mean, man, he's got Polar Express, this and that. Interesting.
Yeah,
Got a kind of style for
He's connected-
visual
He's connected to
animations.
Monster House.
He's very much connected to that like kind of realistic, more looking CGI animation.
Yeah, like the live action Pinocchio.
Oof. All right.
Sounds deafening.
Yeah. Let's see. Another fact I had: between Scrooge leaving Marley's corpse and Scrooge going to the count house, there was a scene where servants and cooks were preparing a banquet, which I'm sure you guys remembered from.
Yeah, there was
the
no
first
turtles though.
coverage. No turtles in this version. And I just wanted to reiterate because I wanted to double check. It is still true that it's just the 35 version, which we covered on the podcast, and this version are the only versions that show the banquet.
Yeah, it was.
Pretty
They
cool.
kind of one of the things that this movie does a little bit. Actually, that's gonna get into coverage. Never mind. I'll save. Keep going.
That was that one. But I'll leave it at that. I had another one, but we're rambling at this point. Any facts from you guys? I'm sure there's probably something.
Oh, I have a question and a fact.
Mhm.
Question to go back on. Crimson, do you own a red scarf?
Plain red, or can there be something?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a plain red's probably better, but if you have like a red scarf with something like a detail or
Yeah, I've got one of those.
okay, so you somewhat have a Scrooge item.
Sure. It's not the right red. It's a very like orangey red. But see what you're going for.
Okay, I was curious. A fact I do have is that scene that you just talked about the banquet really reminded me, connected to the scene in Polar Express where we follow the ticket going through like the woods and the
instead of
eagle
falling through the city.
gets it, and yeah, but falling through the city, and I'm like, this is so similar to Polar Express that I looked up the cinematographer of this film, and it's the same guy. It's Robert Presley, who did the cinematography of this film and Polar Express. Another film he did the cinematography for that we've covered is Mars Needs Moms. And the only other credit I found that he is connected to is Beowulf.
Yeah, a big CG camera person, I guess. Cinematographer. I haven't seen Beowulf. That's the like photorealistic.
Same animation style as this. Yeah.
Now, those are his cinematography roles. He is connected to a bunch of camera operator stuff for like Now You See Me, Saving Mr. Banks, Terminator 3. The other things he's been connected on, but like solely cinematography have been those four.
Ryder, did you have any facts there? Are we jumping into the coverage?
I'm ready to jump into coverage, sir.
All right, we are diving into the coverage with a popcorn structure. We are very familiar with this story, so I think we're good enough to be jumping around wherever the heck we want.
I was curious
that-
because you didn't tell us beforehand, so it's good to know.
With that, we're starting with Ryder.
Oh, why? Oh, no. No, I was going to say, I guess jumping back to what I was going to say a few moments ago, one of the things that this movie does, in kind of similar to the 35 version of this story, is that it does do a lot of the world building. We get to see the rest of the city celebrating Christmas, or a Christmas, as it works. It's not celebrating the particular Christmas.
No, it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Well, this is also years before the story actually takes place. Because remember, this is a flashback with this opening Marley scene, kind of.
Well, yeah, but doesn't the time skip say like several Christmas Eves later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, to me that indicated that the time skip is on Christmas Eve itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so the panning through
We're
London
playing semantics.
Is
Yeah,
Christmas
I know.
Eve.
I know. I'm waiting for him to finish. Yes, I know we're playing semantics. So as I was saying,
remember sorry.
the entire city is celebrating Christmas in general, not the day. So we get to kind of again experience what the city is going through in very similar fashion to the 35 version, and I quite enjoy that because again, while it's all front loaded for this film, you get a good sense of like what the world is like and how everybody celebrates to a degree, and how it's going to contrast with our Mr. Jim Carrey Scrooge.
Yeah, Spriggs. Remember we had a debate on. I view Christmas Eve and Christmas Day as just Christmas. I think that's what what was happening right there.
True, Crimson, but maybe some people haven't heard that episode and they're here for a first time.
Sure.
So, audience, I believe that the beginning of this film takes place on Christmas Eve.
Well, I mean, we all agree it takes place
Yeah,
on Christmas
no
Eve.
one
We're doing a
disagrees with
blanket
that.
statement.
Oh, well, then what's the confusion here?
The confusion
Okay,
is
all
you're
right.
confused.
I don't want to waste time on this. All right, Franks, make a point. Oh my God.
I have no clue what just occurred. Yeah, being popcorn, I'll go to the end of the movie. Crazy for me to do. How do you feel about the fourth wall break from Bob Cratchit?
I had a feeling you're going to bring that up. I didn't realize it was going to be your first point. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not usually your like one-time rule type of deal, but it did kind of pop out as being why are they doing that right now?
Broke the atmosphere
Yeah.
to me, but I'm still neutral on it because it's the narration of the end of the book.
So
Interesting.
I like it more, I think, well, no. I think I like the 80s version more, where it's Fred, but it's the beginning and the end, but we don't actually see him. Like, it is kind of a fourth wall, but he's technically, well, somewhat playing a different character.
Oh yeah, we don't know the narrator's role in the 80s one.
We just know it's the actor who plays Fred.
Yeah.
But this one, like, Bob Cratchit looks at you and reads off the book.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it. Immersion breaking. It just popped out of nowhere because it didn't have the bookend effect that the 80s one did.
I agree. If again, it would be less jarring if the film started with the narration from Bob Cratchit, or like we hear the voice and then we figure out it's Bob's voice at the end, or something to that effect. You know?
Yeah. I think either of those would be preferable.
Yeah, because again, I could see why it would be an issue for the one-time rule thing, but I didn't enjoy it either. I thought it, again, like you guys, broke the immersion. I just kind of tilted my head at it because it's just an odd choice that they decided to make.
But I see why they made it. To get the ending dialogue in.
Yeah, because everyone wants to say the ending dialogue from the book. That's usually how a lot of these Christmas Carol movies go. So, like, again, I agree. I could see why they did it. I just don't think they did it well.
I mean, it could have just been an unknown narrator, too. It didn't have to be Bob turning to the camera and talking to us. We kind of got robbed from his reaction. This is like his most subdued reaction to the Rays thing. He was befuddled, confused, which is good. Other versions had that. He walks outside, watches Scrooge, but we never see him like super joyous of what just happened. He just turns and then turns into a narrator.
Does he break character?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say he turns into a different character being the narrator.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's exactly what happened.
Okay, I think I probably would have liked it more if it was not ominous, but just a voice, but just Jim Carrey just talking normally. Like, not an old man voice.
Sure, could do that. Like, if we just had Bob excited and happy walking out, and then the camera's like walking by him, and then we see Scrooge with Tim on his shoulders, and then a narrator, Jim Carrey, whoever it may be, talking. I think that would be totally fine. It doesn't rob Bob of his reaction just to turn him into a narrator.
Okay.
Let's see. What do I have to go with? Something I didn't care for was the dancing at Fezziwig's place. Because this world is grounded, except for all the magic of the ghosts and stuff. But the world that's actually set is a grounded reality.
Yeah, they broke physics. I get it.
The dancer flies. The dancer lady flies. They're so floaty in their movements that they don't feel like there's any weight behind them. It didn't look right with the world that we have established in this.
Yes. There's only one excuse I can pose for it, but it's not quite true. Or it's like, I don't know. Is it simply this is the memory of what Scrooge remembers it as?
No, because Scrooge sees stuff he wouldn't have remembered. He wouldn't have remembered the kids in the carriage because he was just in the school like half a mile away.
What do you mean he didn't
So-
know the kids in the carriage? He knew all their names.
He wouldn't have seen it to be a memory.
Oh, okay, I see. From where he is, it's not their perspective of. Got it.
It's not something Scrooge would have been privy to.
It is an
Well,
omniscient
not of the kids,
perspective.
but of the dancing, he's there.
Yeah, but I'm laying the groundwork that it's not through Scrooge's memories perspective. It's actually going back in time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I think that was inconsistent and therefore a flaw.
Yeah, I agree. It's not grounded. I think the reason it's there is because I might be getting my dates wrong. Like the Polar Express does something very similar with the hot chocolate dance and sing. That's not realistic at all. But that movie gets away with it more because the train is fucking magic. So
Yeah. And we don't know the people on the train, what they are either.
That's true. Yeah. So you get in comparison to that. That's the only one that's the reason I compared those two in my head is because they're both Christmas films and they have a similar thing where people are dancing and stuff like that in a non-realistic way. And I think Polar Express gets away with it because the magic is directly tied to the train and we don't know what those people are. Whereas here it's supposed to be a memory of some kind, or it's a grounded space in the past. So I agree. Didn't really like the dancing all that much either. At least the way it was portrayed. I think the dancing should have stayed. It just would have edited out the more flowery fantasy bits of it.
Yeah. Agree with that.
And
Alrighty.
I am
Never mind.
neutral.
Let's continue. You're neutral.
Oh, just to go with my perspective, I think I'm neutral to it.
How-
I see both ends of how it could go.
So, okay. I'm confused how you can be neutral on this particular topic. Like, what do you mean it balances out?
I don't praise it for its choice, but I also don't discredit it for what it does. I have it as just like neutral because I don't know if it's, from what I stated, it could have been like just how Scrooge saw it as everyone's like so joyous and like how Fezziwig after on his pulpit like trapezes over and tumbles and sticks a landing. That for a man that stature, it's like that's impractical. But is this just like how joyous Scrooge as his apprenticeship to Fezziwig saw it as? I almost say Fozziwig. To Fezziwig sees it as, of like just how full of life Fezziwig was at that time. So that's like his memory of portraying it, and that's what Pass is going, because Pass is showing past events of Scrooge's, but that's not certain, but it's also not certain. So like the kids in the carriage, Scrooge didn't see the kids in the carriage, but in the past that is what I'm interpreting as the path they actually took, and it's not just conjured by Pass to just put something there. It's actually that's the path they were on in their lives, and Scrooge is just there to observe it where he is, the old man Scrooge. But at the party, Scrooge is actually there with Dick Richardson or whoever that guy is to observe, and then at the party he's in line where he meets Belle, so he's observing that too. So that's why I'm neutral on the whole matter.
Okay. All right. Back to Ryder.
I will jump to the Bob Cratchit ice skates in this film.
Yeah!
I'm very happy to see it.
And he takes a tumble and a fall because he's an old man.
Yeah, but he still has
He
fun.
did pretty well.
Not for me is the key thing. It's showing off Bob's like joy. You know.
Yeah.
I love the giddiness when he and Scrooge part ways outside of the shop.
Office.
Yeah, and the office, and he's just kind of like he starts picking up space and he's just running a little faster and good stuff. I liked it. Very very good character stuff for Bob really really quickly because obviously he's very subdued in his previous scenes with Scrooge, while between Fred and the other charity workers.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
movie is very similar from the past ones we've covered so far. This is very similar to the 30s one.
I can see
I
that in
think.
certain elements. We usually talk about Bob in its own like little section. So let's talk about Bob. What do you guys think of Bob in this iteration?
Other than the fourth wall break, I really like him.
How does he
Even as a
stack up?
cartoon, he seems less cartoony than the one from the 30s, which grounds him more as realistic to me.
But he still has that like whimsical charm to him, right? At least because
He does,
Yeah.
but it plays off more in this movie to me of Bob being a real family man with not a lot for him. This is a very thankful Bob. As the 30s one I saw is very optimistic, but heavily emotional to one side or the other. Like very happy about Christmas and then very sad and grieved over Tiny Tim's death. This one also has that, but very more subtle an approach. And I don't know if that's just the acting portrayal between the difference. I forget the actor's name from the 30s one, but Gary Oldman's performance in this one is very, I think, well done.
What about you, Ryder?
So, this is going to be very weird for me to say. And this kind of applies to a lot of movies. There's a lot of things this movie that does that I think is like my favorite version of it so far. But it also has with it a lot of my least favorite versions so far. So it kind of balances out to be fairly neutral. And I think Bob might be the main exception to that. I think I actually like this Bob a lot because I think for me it blended a lot of what I liked about the somber quietness and like the family just being there to support each other, but we still get Bob like on his own to mourn his son. So for me, I think I got more of that family dynamic I said I wanted in an earlier one. And here it kind of was a nice blend of both, where I got both the family dynamic and I also got Bob grieving on his own. And I actually do like the part where he pauses on the stairs, even though it gives the audience time for Jim Carrey Scrooge to look him in the eye and realize how like sad Bob really is and how like mournful he is. But he's pausing on the stairs because he has to brace himself because he's going up to the room to see where his son is laid to rest for the time being. So there's a lot of that goes into this Bob. I do think he's overall, actually, I think his writing is more reminiscent of how the Muppets Christmas Carol portrayed Scrooge, in the sense of like this Bob has a lot less to work with in terms of how the story is using its time with him. But I still think they nailed all the parts that they needed to nail, I guess, in order to make him a good functional Bob. I do have issues with Bob, but it's not necessarily it doesn't really have anything to do with Bob himself. It has more to do with Scrooge present and I think some stuff from the family.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I don't really care for this Bob. I didn't really feel anything while watching him. I think an aspect of that is because we don't get a lot of him. First thing in his introduction in the beginning, he's not much of anything. We missed out on the whole coal conversation. All we get is an exchange of him looking for the coal, and that's about it. So there's kind of a interaction missing with Scrooge. Scrooge obviously looks at him while he does it, so there is technically an interaction. but there's no back and forth talking, establishing more of their dynamic between each other. All we get is the I expect you want the day off, and how's that fair? That's it. We miss the whole conversation between them, and I feel like it's actually an important talk between them. And he does have the fun ice skating bit. So there is some joyfulness to him, but even with the payoff at the end of him getting a raise, he was subdued, which I kind of hinted at earlier with the narration flip. Was we never really got to see him super happy about it. He just is confused and leaves, flips to narrator.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot is missing for Bob for me to get enjoyment out of.
Yeah, I think what I agree is missing the most is the ending. I was actually fine. I was actually fine skipping the Cole conversation because we have the part where he's holding his hand over the candle, and he's getting glares from Scrooge most of the time with charity workers, and so we could see we get a sense of their dynamic in a more quiet way. So I didn't necessarily need the conversation, I guess.
There's also no payoff whatsoever from the goose in Delivered.
That's also
Because
true.
Scrooge does that Christmas Day, and this is the following day after that.
Was there a payoff in the 30s and 80s one?
I think there's the only one there's a
The 30s one. No, the
Okay.
80s one there is because he's at his door, right?
No, he goes to Fred's house.
He went to Fred's. So the only one that pays on that.
No,
off
not
is...
Scrooge. The goose. The goose is at Bob Cratchit's house.
Yeah,
right?
the guy delivers it at the Cratchits. Yeah.
Okay, so we actually get to see Bob's reaction to receiving this gift.
Yeah. Suppose we do on that one. The 30s did.
Yeah. I mean, the only ones that
which matches this one to the 30s even more so in that regard.
Yeah, I think the ones that match sort of, mind you, I think are the Muppets in the 80s version because...
Well, yeah, the Muppet Scrooge just breaks into his house.
Yeah.
And has a
Yeah, but I mean, he brings the feast to him. So, like, there is still that edge of, like, we see the reaction of it.
Yeah.
Strikes. Point, please.
You know what? I'll go to one of the elephants in the room. That's been a recurring thing from the past 3 coverages that I'll bring up now. Crimson, how did you feel about Scrooge not touching the snow on his headstone?
Annoyed is what I felt.
You were annoyed? I thought you'd be happy.
I'd be happy if they were consistent, but they're still inconsistent. He touches icicles and cans and the floorboards when getting hit next to the rat. So he doesn't interact with the tombstone, but he interacts with other things in this movie that doesn't have a problem in the other movies for.
And they show a table go through him.
So they fix the tombstone, but they have problems elsewhere. The only thing that kind of saves it is I don't think they say in this movie he can't interact with the outside world. It just said they can't interact or can't be seen in this one.
I guess that does help it.
So yeah, it was kind of a double-edged sword there.
They fixed the gravestone scene. Yay!
But they have him interacting with a bunch of other stuff.
I do think this grave scene, though, is a good... plays more fear into this Scrooge. Because he doesn't get to choose to look. Whereas the other 3 have actually, on themselves, gone to the point of curiosity to find an answer.
Because I saw this one a long time ago, I'm wondering if this is the movie is the reason why I developed the theory that I think Scrooge was supposed to die that night. Purely because of we see the date on the tombstone, it being December 25th. And obviously the year is left ambiguous.
You can tell it's a 4, so it's not 1840 something. But you can't really tell what it says.
Yeah, that's why I always have been going with the thought that he visited this night because he would die the next one.
Yeah.
Well,
But also could be said, because then if he is to die this night of all the visitations, then the spirits gave him life.
I mean, potentially. I mean, it's open-ended. They don't show the date, as all the other versions haven't shown any death date of any kind. Or
That's true.
are hinting towards, other than it's in the future. This one just confirms it's within the 40s. So it's within the decade. That's
But
all
what if
this
it
one
was like,
confirms.
Scrooge was like a second father to Tiny Tim? But yeah, only for a year before he died.
Yeah, well, that would be an interesting addition. They didn't throw that in there. This future at the cemetery, I didn't really care. I mean, I like the visuals. I like his panic, but I feel like they changed his motives in this one. This one felt way more heavily swayed to his preservation of his own self than the fear of the future of others. He is questioned, does Tim make it? But all the visuals are him fearing his own death and not of fearing of the future of others.
Yeah,
I felt like they swayed way too much towards his own mortality.
Yeah, I've kind of been half joking, half not about how future essentially is always looks like death, and I think this one is very much far embraces that, I guess, too much in terms of the way it's going about its story, which is ironic, all things considered, because I think this death might have my favorite entrance where we see Scrooge's shadow just morph into Death's shadow or Future's shadow. But I think it might be my least favorite third ghost overall so far with all the Christmas carols. Just because it's just filled with so much filler.
This is your least favorite Christmas yet to come out of all four we've covered?
Yes.
Okay. Making sure I just understood.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, he might have my favorite entrance and stuff like that because I think that, like I said, I like the way he just moves into Scrooge's shadow. But I think this is my least favorite Christmas yet to come because they waste so much time in this with that act. Needless carriage chases.
That carriage scene, unbelievable.
Yeah, it was awful.
Interesting.
Sprinks, what's your thoughts on the point I made about this being too swayed towards his own mortality opposed to him thinking about others and changing?
I agree with it is that of this Scrooge. I don't think it's a bad thing though. It's just this interpretation of what's being portrayed of this Scrooge, and I think it works with it. What I didn't like was how 180 his care for Tiny Tim was just seeing the child, and it wasn't a gradual climb opposed to the other three we've seen.
Oh yeah, I wrote that down too. Like he asks before the scene.
Very quick.
Yeah, he asks before that scene's even over, if Tiny Tim will be okay, and then he asks again, after the scene's over, which for me was
for the
just
character
a
of this
pacing issue.
Scrooge that's come across. Just it did feel a little pacing, but it just felt like, why would he care?
I agree.
Yep.
This Scrooge, I think, is the most inconsistent Scrooge on his feelings during every visit.
I was going to say, I think this Scrooge is the coldest.
Yes. Certainly with money. I think this is the most greedy of them so far.
Those things are not incongruent. I agree. I think he's the most inconsistent Scrooge, and he's definitely the most greedy Scrooge.
The introduction of him giving the 2 coins to the caretaker or the Undertaker, and then taking the 2 off of Jacob's eyes to even himself out for greed. That said a lot about him.
Well, and I think they actually help fix Jacob Marley a little bit with that scene too. If you believe in the whole 2 coins on the eye thing,
he didn't go to rest.
Well, the point of having 2 coins on the eyes is to have payment for the ferryman to move on. He didn't have payment to move on, so he stayed. At least that's what I think they're going with. Yeah.
But
that helps.
Yeah, we should probably talk about the world building problem with seeing all the ghosts.
Oh God,
So
why did they add
needless.
that?
So needless. Such a problem. I get it's for the visual, but it's a problem.
Yeah, Sprinks, what are your thoughts on all the ghosts?
Not a problem because it's in the book.
Oh, well, the book can be wrong too. So why? Why that doesn't make any sense. What about the movie?
No, I just saw it as like a fear tactic being played from Jacob Marley onto Scrooge.
Let's see, seeing all
seeing,
the other
like,
spirits
all-
walk the earth.
Yeah, all of the misfortunes of those who did move on.
It's a problem for the movie because it's a problem in just how they're portraying the world from then on. Because if that exists and he can see that now, we should be seeing it more.
Oh, not at all how I took it. I saw it as that's just Jacob Marley, what he showed off to Scrooge. It's not something Scrooge can just do. It's not a paranorman situation.
I would agree, if not for the fact that Ghost literally charges right at him because they all can see him too. So not that they wouldn't be able to. It's just it's a choice that they didn't need to do. I think it overcomplicated the world building. So it's a nick for me. And as I said in the podcast before, I don't care that it's in the book. It should not be in the film.
Well, I mean, it delivers issues of if Jacob was showing Scrooge the ghosts, why can't ghosts show themselves to other people then? The guy looking at his wife and child, the one that charges Scrooge, why can't he show himself to her? Why does Marley have this power? So it does create issues. If you say it's the Jacob's power to reveal ghosts, why can't every ghost have that?
That I don't know.
So it brings up issues, which in several ways you could cut it up.
But this Jacob also was able to conjure ghastly physical things. Like he turned the chair into a ghostly thing to pull Scrooge towards the window.
Yeah, which was unnecessary. Like I said, that just it just introduces problems. That was didn't need to be there. They're doing it for the visual. I think wasn't worth it.
It introduces powers to ghosts, and then you have to question why don't the ghosts actually use these? What makes Jacob special? And they don't have an answer to why Jacob's special.
Dare I talk about Ryan Johnson?
You said his name. I think that's good enough. Okay. Sprinks.
That's me. Let's see. I do like it's a physical show of a bookend that we enter through the book, so we're in the world of A Christmas Carol and not wherever it takes place where the book is, and then ends with the book closing. So it's all a story being told.
Which makes the Bob thing even weirder.
It does, but if it's someone reading off the story and they're like putting on, funny voices, whatever, of the characters for the dialogue of reading off a story, then that person too would be the narrator.
Yeah, but the narrator wouldn't be Bob, and everybody would be the narrator then.
Yeah, it just. Yeah. See, the thing about the Bob thing, I don't. The narrator bit of Bob at the end of the fourth wall break, I don't like the pacing and the break of immersion of the story, but I fully get that what he's saying is the end of the story being told. Because it was all a book from the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm. But they didn't have to make Bob do that. Just the issue.
No, it could have just been Gary Oldman's voice over if they still wanted that to be the voice of the narration.
Yep.
Because there's no voice to begin with when the book opens. It's just some music, and then it shows the words Marley was dead to begin with, and then it shows the illustration of Jacob Marley in the coffin, right? There's no one talking.
Correct. No talking.
Okay.
Scrooge talking about dead as a doornail was the first words uttered, I believe. Yeah. Let's see. A question I was going to hold to the end, but I know I'd forget, so might as well just say it early. Did they capitalize enough on this being an animation, or did they overvalue the use of animation?
But kind of funny enough, I've been wrestling on that question all the while in the back of my head. I think they did capitalize on the use of the animation because the world is still grounded enough that when they lean heavy into the fantasy bit, and mostly I think where the only time that I thought the animation was a little bit over the top is in one scene with Present where he was like swirling his torch around his head and turned every like it was after he'd already converted the house into like a fucking mobile observation thing. Because I saw that as all just playing right into the medium, which I thought was fine. I think there was just one part where it was just a little too much of like the colorful visual animation style setup with the torch like being waved over his head. So I think I'm okay with it. I think they made use of it.
I don't know what you think, Sprinks.
I don't fully grasp your question. Of understand, like, are you saying
Well, when you choose
could this
a
have
medium,
been made without animation?
No, I'm saying did they capitalize on the fact that it is an animation, and if they did they overdo it? If you need to ponder, I can say my point on it. Because
Yeah,
there's
please
a
do.
lot of benefits to it being an animation. We get hyper exaggerated expressions, exaggerated characteristics. Like Scrooge is a cartoon character, but the way he's visually portrayed, because it's an animation, sells more of his character. We get a lot more magic
Past,
stuff
present, yeah.
that can be portrayed, and I think it's also in this instance a crutch because they overused its visuals, like the carriage scene. If this was mapped out as a live action film, there would be no carriage scene. There would be no mini Scrooge. But because they went animation, they tried to explore things they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So Scrooge getting shot up into space and getting chased by a ghost carriage and shrinking into the size of a mouse or a rat. That is implemented because it's an animation. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards, Sprinks, if you're grasping what I'm saying.
Okay, I get what you're saying. I don't think I agree at all. That's an interesting take that I never would have thought of for any animated picture. There are things that an animation can do more so and in ease than live action, but with nowadays technology, almost anything can be achieved.
Yeah, but if it was done in live action, it would have a different feel than an animation. Animation is a choice.
But I don't think it's impossible for the carriage scene to be made in live action.
I didn't say it
Or
would
being
be
shot up into
impossible to be
space.
made. I don't think they would have done it if it was live action. It would feel different.
And and I guess that's where I'm like stuck on, because I don't see why they couldn't. Or why they choose not to if it's the story they want to go with. I don't know, something in a movie
Sprinks, it's
where
like...
Well, I don't see
Sorry,
something
I
in
don't
a
wanna cut
movie
you
where
off.
it's like, if it's live action, say this was framed to be live action, and they have the carriage scene and they have the script for it and they got the storyboard for it, and then they come up to it and they go, oh yeah, we don't know how to make that. And then they, like, in production, just rip that out of the film, even though all this project has gone to it and time. So something like that just, they get around to achieve it somehow.
It's
Or
not
they
that it's
maybe-
impossible to do, Sprinks. View it like 3D. In 3D, like old 3D movies, you'd have these scenes like, oh, well, that's clearly done because it's a 3D movie, like Spy Kids, with stuff coming out of the screen because it's a 3D movie.
Or like the church tower post in this one.
Yeah, a little different of what I'm going for, but the 3D old 3D movies like Spy Kids 3, those scenes are specifically made to accommodate the format of 3D. And that's true with live action and animation stuff too. some things are better as an animation, and some are easier, and those are choices that are made in production. So if you're in an animation style, you would capitalize on things that are more difficult to produce.
Okay. Guess that clears it up a bit. Then I'll go with that. I think they capitalized on using their animation.
But not on the second part I asked of over capitalizing.
No?
Okay.
So have been thinking about it because I guess I got a little more now to add. I agree they overused it, and I've been looking at the Ghost of Christmas Future through just the lens of this: we're wasting time. This is just badly paced. This is just filler, and it's all unnecessary. And I think a lot of that's kind of overshadowed what I thought of the animation. Yeah, I agree. A lot of that's needless. So maybe I think I'm gonna amend my stance here a little bit. I do think they overused it a bit because I remember being annoyed by the rocketing into space. Because I just saw that as filler as well. But I'm like, okay, I guess that could also be considered like this is just them overusing the animation. I took more of the writing pacing problems with it than I took with I viewed it as like, why is this here? Is this necessary for the story? Pretty much is why my lens I had with it.
Yeah, and I think we're in a special spot doing a bunch of different versions of the same thing because we can kind of distinguish what is creative liberties. This whole carriage thing is creative liberty. This is none of the other stuff, which I think puts it more towards this is an animation. Let's have some fun with it.
Yeah, like I said, I have pacing problems with the time that it wastes, but I never considered that they were wasting the time specifically for the animation stuff, which is something to say for, I guess, the medium itself. The fact they overuse their animation is not going to factor too much into my objective. It's not. It just happens to be that like they wasted time with it in the sense that it just didn't really give me a. Felt like it was bad. It was bad pacing, is what it was. It was unnecessary for the plot and the world building. I don't know why Scrooge needed to be shrunk down. Other than just for the visual aesthetic, and that's not enough when you're taking out when you're looking at when you're combining like the medium of everything working together cohesively for film. So,
all right. I think writer's next.
all right, I will talk about past. What did we think of just the ghost itself, the design?
All the ghosts or
No,
Jacob?
Just past.
Oh, just passed. Very peculiar, uncanny valley face. But it being like a floating light, and the choice of how he talks as a character as a whole, I think it's good. I don't know how intentional the face is supposed to feel uneasy, or if it was just the style, because people always point out Polar Express is like uncanny valley, weird faces. This is kind of in the same vein. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much of that is intentional, but it definitely gives off uneasiness with the voice and the face.
Yeah, I think the voice is what made it uneasy for me because I think the design I thought was okay, even though it's again uncanny valley. But again, I went into this expecting that because I grew up watching the Polar Express. So, yeah, all right. Spring's thoughts on past.
Well, it sounds like you're comparing it more for the animation styling of the Uncanny Valley than the design of the character.
A little bit of both. I think the Uncanny Valley just happens to be an effective, like it's what happened, just what their choices that they made for the design of the character. So a bit of both.
Okay. Oh, sorry. The question. I think it was. Past is the hardest one to do because of such a weird description of the book of what past looks like, and I think one of the good a good adaptation to go with is making it a candle flame, And I think that really worked. However, I would have liked it more if there was more distortion, like a broken mirror look to the face, so it slightly changed and altered the perspective of the face shape at times, rather than kind of just a floating flame of one solid head look. Because when it goes to the part towards the end where the faces keep shifting of all the past faces, that's kind of a description of what it looks like in the book, of just having like multiple looks to it, and it would like in 1 second have like 2 legs versus 3 legs versus 7 legs back to 1 leg. And I'm like, that seems really clever to go with a flickering flame since it's always changing shape and look. But I think that would have been too scary or maybe too confusing to come across to an audience, so they kept it this. But I think it's a safe way for a younger audience, especially for this animated film, to portray. So I think it's a smart way, but it definitely could have been stronger.
And this is book accuracy for you?
Yeah. When something's taken from the source material came first, and that's the originality, and everything else is based off of it and the creative liberties that can be taken with it, which is the comparison I try to make with it. Unfortunately, when it comes to something where I haven't read the source material, then it's just as is for me, because I believe I've covered it multiple times. I don't know which pods or recaps or I brought it up, but past prior knowledge I have towards something fully daps my ratings towards it. I believe we brought this up when we covered Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and my past knowledge of Pinocchio and the lore of that shaped my rating for that film.
Subjective?
Both. Well, actually, probably more objective than subjective.
Well, with Pinocchio, you were talking about the production of it being made, not really the story it's based off of. Because with the logic of how accurate is this to the book, then why can't you apply it to how accurate it is to other versions instead of reviewing it on its own merits?
I mean, I suppose I do. I mean, I've brought up in this one how similar it is to the 1935 version, comparatively over the Muppets and the 80s version.
Yeah, but you're those are making comparisons, but now you're saying it actually affects your objective, comparing it to other versions. How does that work?
Comparing it to the originality form of what it comes from, if I know it. When it came to Pinocchio, I have not read the original works of Pinocchio or the story of it. I just know it off of the Disney version and some adaptation. I guess Shrek slightly counts for that, but those two, but not the originality of it. So that's the comparison in that regard. And that would be more subjective than objective. But the little snippets I do know of a connection would be objective.
So this is hypothetical. So I'm going to preface this right now. If, for example, you decide to read all the Lord of the Rings books, would that then affect your view of the movie? Or would your views of the movie affect that of the books? Because the books obviously came first, but you saw the movies first. So would that affect your view of the books, or would it go vice versa? Because technically the books are the original source.
It would be split. Being that I haven't read the books and I've seen all the films, reading the books would be subjectively to the movies. However, the movies then would be objectively seen from the books.
That's something I'm lost on, because a book is different than the movies. Books are different than movies. Harry Potter, for instance, has a whole bunch that's cut out. So are you going to dock Harry Potter for not having the ghost
party, Eves?
Are the movies negative now because it doesn't have that? That's not fair to the movies, because the movies don't have the place for it.
And how I see it is the movies chose not to tell those stories.
To better their own story.
Yeah. So that's clear. That, to me, is a subjective choice to make.
But objectively, it's worse because it doesn't have the party.
because it cut out things in the book.
We'll move on. This is more of a recap thing.
Yeah,
All right.
it's an irrational-
Franks, you're up.
I feel like we can continue that in the recap.
Let's see here. I like after Marley's dead body and Scrooge walks away, the first song to be played is God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, which is slightly a tongue-in-cheek towards Marley and his practice of what he is, but it's also putting him to rest, but he can't because of the coins taken from him.
You shall be a ghost forever.
Yes.
So I found that clever usage of a song to be used.
Yeah, fair enough. I will jump to Fred's introduction with Scrooge. Comparatively to the previous iterations, this one actually felt the most argumentative with Scrooge.
Absolutely.
And again, this is not to disparage the film. I like how every version of this scene has its different nuances to kind of exaggerate particular character traits. But in this one, Fred is very much he doesn't roll over for Scrooge, pretty much. Which there's something to that I do like, in the sense that there's still love there. It's just loud, if that makes sense. And so one of the things I really enjoyed about it was the fact that because it was like a crescendoing argument, it made more sense for me for this particular Bob to clap once Fred made his point. So we still got that bit in there as well. And I think it works for this version, yeah, despite the differences.
What do you think on that point, Springs?
I think it's very quick. It's a very quick Fred.
Just in the opening or in general?
Very in general. Like I think the other Freds have more to them to convey. This one's very just a quick dialogue to get through the character. I think for the time of the film to pace more around Scrooge himself than of the characters in the world. Not to say this is a bad Fred. I don't remember much of the Fred from the 30s one, but the 80s one seemed very endearing to Scrooge and very trying to be compassionate towards him. And then the Muppets one is just over the top, joyous, opposite usage to Scrooge's character of a very black and white look. But this one just seemed very quick to get the points across of what needed to be made for more so of Scrooge's point of view towards Christmas and how he feels about it than an actual connection between the two characters of their relationship.
Oh, I think the connection's there. It's just, I mean, like...
I'm not saying it's not there. I just don't think that's the purpose of that scene.
No, yeah. No, it's a multifaceted scene. So the purpose is to establish their connection, right? But it's also to focus on, like, again, it's highlighting the differences of who they are as characters and how Scrooge views Christmas. Which is fine, because you're right. I do think this film spends most of its time focusing on Scrooge's point of view specifically. Like, it takes effort to show Scrooge's reaction to Bob's mournful face at the end. Like, that's what this film is focusing on, is his reaction to that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't disagree with what you say.
For me, this is my favorite Fred introduction. I like how he's not just the happy Scrooge. He is more argumentative. He's more stern and even disappointed, and it comes across. The thing I didn't care about this Fred was his second appearance with the game. That, I agree, is like sped run. That was really quick. We jump in mid game where they're just describing what the word is. We didn't get him walking into his party talking about how he visited Scrooge and all the positives and negatives of that interaction, but we just get to the game. So I do feel like that got lost.
I'll agree to that as well.
Yes, I agree with that portion being lost, but I do like the payoff of what it goes with in the present day afterward.
Yeah, of him over listening and then walking in right when his name's about to be said. That
Yeah.
I did like that.
Yeah,
That was well done.
I agree with that take completely. I agree. I don't like the fact that they stole the rest. That they pretty much the rest of the scene feels like it's missing. But I do like the payoff. When Scrooge shows up, I agree, 100% pretty much.
Yeah, it
I
felt like they were just trying to check the box. Like, we have to have this game scene, but we don't want to put too much time into it. Let's just streamline it as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And comparatively, comparing it to the 80s version, where Scrooge is very newly changed of being like, I'm your uncle, I'm here for family, please let me be invited to this, banquet of yours, everything very upbeat about it, and a change of character. I think I prefer this Scrooge more, even though it's a lot smaller scene, of just how uncomfortable he is trying to be accepted by his nephew.
Oh, that shot
Because he's done wrongdoings, and him just by the door looking so small.
Yeah, that shot of him
frail.
looking small and frail, while Fred is in the other half of the frame, like overtaking the frame because he's quote unquote bigger in the frame.
Yeah, but he's shocked that he even came, because this whole time, the game is to be cruel to Scrooge. So that's his mindset right when he sees him.
Probably not the whole version of the game, just the bit that we see.
Well, true, but if Scrooge didn't arrive, we saw how that pans out.
Yeah,
It's all laughing at him.
I agree. Like I said, I won't deny that there's a bit of cruelty there, but I think they make a good job of showing that he's drunk, or they have been drinking wine and stuff like that.
Yes.
So
he's very lively, but
I definitely get a lot of that. So I agree. I think that there's a good payoff to it, and I also like how quickly that Fred is like willing to embrace Scrooge. Like there's that stretch of awkward silence, but then they're just genuinely happy that he's there. So we still get, like I said, they shortcut a lot of things, which is what I don't like, because I would much rather have the build up to the game scene, obviously, and then still get this payoff. And because there's a lot of other things that could just be cut and to allow for the characters to come to their full fruition.
Yeah. I'll go back to present, because we talked a little bit about how Scrooge kind of sped up his care for Tim, and I feel like they sped up his just care for people in general, because before Tim we go over a bakery, and he makes a comment that there's people with no means to cook. Why do you close every seventh day? So Sunday the stores are closed. And all I wrote is, why does he care? Why does Scrooge care that poor people can't buy bread on Sundays? Why does he care at this point? He shouldn't care. I did like Present's retort of, don't blame me, it's the people that pretty much the religion. Yeah. The religion of people who believe in me, how they dictated that. So I did like that retort.
Me too.
But I don't know why Scrooge cared.
Like the 80s version, where I believe I said in our coverage how past, I feel like nothing really changed Scrooge. Present got him to think, and yet to come made him change, like fully like convert, as the pacing I thought of this one. This Scrooge, I don't think past did like anything to his character of Scrooge. Like it just annoyed him. Kind of like the 30s version, where he was just being tormented by the memories of his past. And then Present was such a fast flip of caring for people. There was no gradual. I didn't see anything of like thinking, like Scrooge actually sitting down and thinking over the matters of stuff changing. Because even with Tiny Tim, I think it's Tiny Tim, where Scrooge is going to walk off and Present picks him up.
Well, that's when
like,
Martha was insulting him. That's what he was walking off.
Yeah, I think best faith interpretation is that he's in denial at the end of his adventure with past, which is always what happens when he's like trying to get away and go away. Like I think this one is more denial, whereas obviously in the Muppets it's very sorrowful, and then the 80s version it's more setup than denial, and then 35
is torture.
35 is torture. So it's very interesting that we got a little bit different ending for Scrooge with each version of Past. And this one, I think, best interpretation is complete denial. If not that, I would agree. My only other interpretation that's if it's not denial is that Past did nothing.
Yeah, that was what I was saying earlier, where I felt like this was an inconsistent Scrooge. I don't feel like there was a steady growth of his character in this.
fully
He
agree.
kind of felt the same through everything to me.
Yeah, I'm in
And
agreement.
then we get the normal beats of, oh, I care, please. Can I change is this actually going to happen? We hit the beats, but we don't see why he hits those beats in this.
Yeah, I'm.
It's was it the A's one where I brought it up? How when Scrooge wakes up in his bed, I said he's playing it off happy that he's alive more so than the joy of the Christmas spirit to like
That's what you
continue
claimed, yeah.
change his life. I feel kind of the same with this one, where this Scrooge is more just happy to be alive than a change of character.
This one at least makes some sense since he saw most of the date of where he was supposed to die.
Yeah.
But
Scrooge is incongruent with himself, I feel.
yeah, and what exaggerates that particular problem, I think even more so, is because we spend more time with this Scrooge than we do with the other plot lines. Even though we waste time with this Scrooge as well, like with the whole carriage chase sequence and showcasing more of the world through the observation room with present. So there is definitely, and flying around with past. Like instead of just appearing in places, we get to see the flying from place to place to a much like larger degree.
I do like that it's played off somewhat that it's all taking place in his room.
Kind of.
Like there are hints to show that he never left.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. My point is that like we spend a lot of time with this Scrooge that is kind of wasted, and I think that really exaggerates the inconsistencies that are already cropping up with this Scrooge. That might just be my take on why like the inconsistencies feel worse to me in this than they might have otherwise been.
It can definitely be an element. Like I 100% agree with the whole carriage thing. I mean, I what did I write for that scene? I think I just wrote like waste of time or something along those lines. But
it's filler, is what
yeah,
it is.
carriage chase is a waste.
Yeah.
That's
I think
what
it's
I wrote.
scare tactic or a tone usage.
Yeah,
But we kind of already have that.
but again, like it's just a waste of time. Like we could have spent that time with Scrooge going from place to place in a more manner that allows the character to be fleshed out, and instead they chose that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
But-
what helps it makes him feel more inconsistent, is what it does. We already all agreed that he is the most inconsistent Scrooge, but like it makes it worse because that's what they chose to spend their time on instead of providing.
Is it also possibly seen as this is the usage of a way of how Yet to Come traverses Scrooge 2 points in the future?
We see him use a portal window thing.
So we see him use a portal window. We see him chasing around in the carriage and shrinking him, and then we see him just teleporting him directly to the front of the bank. So I don't know why this is in the film because
This is the spectacle of
yeah.
Yeah, respectable.
It's there specifically for the spectacle. And
This is the animation thing. Yeah. Spectacle.
And the red eyes on the horses are cool for like the brief second we saw them, but that's I still see it for the waste of time that it is, unfortunately. Because I think
whenever
sorry, you finish.
Oh, and whenever anything in shadow, being future, the horses, whatever, come out of a shadow, it looks pretty cool.
Oh, the hand and all that.
Yeah. So.
Like I said, I love this feature's entrance in Scrooge's Shadows, where Scrooge's Shadow just turns into future. I really loved that.
Well, Sprink's, I guess, more on future or a point of your own, I guess. Whatever.
Well, I guess a little more clarification on what I meant for the traversal. It just from where Scrooge was of when the hearse arrived of at the steps got him to Mrs. Dilber and the old Joe, which I think was just a means to get there, but in the use of comedy and horror to portray a tone across was the usage of it to what I saw. But it still got him to where he needed to go without much of yet to come showing an actual change of direction, which is how I saw it as like yet to come still controlled all of that.
Is it a waste of time or filler?
It's filler.
Okay.
I don't see it as a waste, but I see it poorly done.
And would that be a negative attribute?
More so, yeah, than positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
My main gripe, I guess, being popcorn, I can go. My main gripe I have with this movie subjectively is the comedy in it. I think the comedy really tarnishes the fun of the film, which is kind of ironic.
I think the comedy, unfortunately, kind of ruins the tone sometimes too. Because, no offense to, we're supposed to feel fear with Christmas yet to come. Yet when Scrooge is squeaking, like I'm not supposed to. I just feel nothing.
Or hitting the icicles, or yeah, I know it's a joke, but it doesn't fit.
Yeah, like I said,
or when Jacob Marley's being all scary and wailing, and then his jaw breaks, and then he's like flapping his jaw to talk.
Yeah, like there's a lot of little injected comedy bits because it makes those bits stand out more because they haven't been in any version that we've covered thus far. You know. So
yeah,
the comedy, a lot of the injected comedy feels unnecessary. I think I've been thinking a lot about what injected comedy I did like in the film. I think Present picking Scrooge up when he's trying to slink away when Emily Cratchit's talking about him. I think that works because I think that works more than most of the other injected comedy because that doesn't really change anything about what the scene's going on. It still keeps the tone mostly because even though like obviously it's a little less serious because Scrooge is busy trying to slink away during a serious scene. So there's still a tonal clash, but it works because it's within a little bit of character for Scrooge. Because we already see Scrooge trying to leave the room as soon as he gets in with Present as well.
Strengths. Whatever you want.
Boy. Trying to go in normal mode. Oh, I like that this has far more show than tell of Scrooge's character as an introduction, more so than the Muppets. Because the Muppets has a whole song of Scrooge, which kind of is exposition a bit, but it's all lyrical of telling the character of who it is. And this one, it's very show of he goes to listen to carolers and they stop singing because they're uncomfortable around his presence. And the blind man's dog steers the blind man away because Scrooge is appearing. And then I guess the tuppence earlier, just like those three bits to this character really shows off who this Scrooge is comparatively.
Since you brought up the carolers, the one note about the carolers, I do like the setup that we get with that and then the payoff for it that happens later on. With the carolers being uncomfortable and he finishes the song for them and then they all join back in. So a little nugget that I did enjoy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
did you bring up the blind man springs because you read that in the book?
No, I don't remember the blind man in the book. I just saw it as a visual thing where it's not being told to you, it's being shown to you in the movie.
Okay. Yeah, it is in the book. I found that during my research. So just thought you'd do that. Ryder, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to the carol scene real quick. One of the things I actually like about the payoff with the carolers is that we see it from the charity man's point of view who's still in shock, you know? And the scene with the charity workers in this one is very dark. And you can see how offended and like put off the charity workers are in this one because the camera lingers on their reaction. And so to see the charity worker in shock as he watches Scrooge like sing with the carolers, or like we zoom away and we kind of see over the shoulder, so him just having seen that particular scene, so we linger on him for a second. I actually very much that they injected that reaction from him to the
Yeah,
watching Scrooge with the carolers.
which plays off that he doesn't recognize him.
Yeah, which again it feeds into how much this Scrooge has changed. Oh, and it's one of those nuggets that I really really like because he's just in shock. He doesn't recognize the Scrooge because he's obviously very very different.
Yeah, and I think, Ryder, I believe you've touched on it previously in Muppets, and I think the one in the 80s, again, 30s was weeks ago when we covered it, so I can't recall. But the charity workers, the thing in the Muppets was if there was their first interaction seeing Scrooge, or if they've come multiple times and not knowing his character, there's a great line in this one where they meet him and say, "Are we in the presence of Scrooge or Marley?" Which indicates this is their first time meeting him.
Yep, I wrote that down too. I'm like, oh, that's good. Solves any problems that we might have.
Yeah, because Muppets established everyone knows who Scrooge was. That was a good line to throw in here.
I also like, again, Scrooge's character just holding the business card over the flame.
Yeah,
Like, just it's slight, just like sinister sense to him. Not sinister the guest on the pod, but sinister the wording. I realize how confusing that can be going forward.
sure. And with that particular scene, I just love that there's a pile of money next to him while he's having this whole talk about charity. It's a nice visual.
Yep. There's also well, kind of in the bits that might be slight fixes. This Marley talks about having traveled the world, which might be an indication that he does visit other people to kind of warn them.
Oh.
Which helps a little, which that might be reading into it a little bit, but I can at least infer something from that line that implies that this is not Marley's first visit to somebody.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's enough to at least infer now, which is I think is a little bit of an improvement of this Scrooge not being the why him question mark, of everybody
He's
else.
not conjured just for this occurrence of this specific Christmas Eve, but he's been around for the past several years walking around.
Yeah, so there's an implication that he's been traveling the world, or he says like I've been traveling a lot, or something to that effect, which I think actually helps a lot. And it is not. Whereas with obviously the charity workers, you have a direct line that fixes any potential problems. This one is not a direct line, but at least you can infer something from it, which I think is a little bit of an improvement.
Yeah, I didn't see it that way, but I like that interpretation. It still leaves the issue of why is Jacob Marley the special guy that does this, but I do like the idea of that. Would kind of explain why it's taken 7 years to get to Scrooge, because he's been busy with other people. Maybe, I don't.
Yeah, or maybe it's just because it's supposed to be Scrooge's time, so that's why he is now scheduled on Marley, and Marley is just happens to be his gold worker, so he's going to go do it himself. So there's something to infer there, which I like, at least.
Let's see. Something I didn't care for regarding Present is, well, subjectively, I didn't really enjoy the whole floor thing. I liked the visual, but once it was flying around and being like a vessel, I didn't really care for that. But something I didn't understand is why it didn't do that at Fred's house. He kind of just teleported Scrooge to Fred's when he's been flying him to the bakery and to Bob's house. But we don't get that view at Fred's house. I didn't really know why.
Couldn't tell you.
Same, couldn't tell you. I think they got sick of animating it, I guess. I don't know.
Is that where they were cutting corners?
Who knows?
Because I actually do like the line about this being heaven's view of the world. Like this is what what heaven would, I guess, view the world from above and stuff like that. So I do like that
That's
bit.
one of the few quotes I had written down.
Yes.
Not many mortals are granted a heavenly view of man's world.
Yes. One of the
Also, sorry, just also the darkness that Present starts to grow on really plays off that he's looking down on people.
That present is?
Yeah. Like the men of the cloth comment, and then ignorance and want later. It's like he's constantly looking down onto man, I guess, as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is going to be this is a potentially more of a religious interpretation. I think the wreath around Present's head is supposed to be a reference to Jesus. So the idea that he's like, it plays into the idea of judgment or Judgment Day a little bit for me as to why I think he does look down on man, because he's judging them because that's his job, if that makes sense.
Well, he's certainly judging Scrooge.
Yeah, he's certainly judging Scrooge, but he also, like he says, he refers to the men of the clock. He's like, and one of the reasons I'm not really religious anymore, not to get too deep into the subject, is that like faith can lead you to do different things that might be incongruent with like the intent behind them. So I do like the comment in the sense of like it pays respect to the intent that most people go into religion for, is that everyone goes into religion because, or people go into religion for support and like the ideals that are within it. So I like that they pay respect to that in that singular line of dialogue. So they're getting across some big ideas here really quickly, in a decently written manner for the most part.
I thought I heard a Sprinks noise in there somewhere.
Well,
Do you have something to say?
it helps cement a little more of an exact of this Present saying how many brothers he has.
Yeah, like this one's exact. I don't have any issue. I'm like, okay, cool, we're good. Yeah.
Just more so into what Ryder said, though, of a comparison.
All right, we see a little weird thing, and I didn't know if you guys could answer it for me. He does this, like, I wrote it in my notes as a side boogie. He does this little dance thing in Scrooge's room. Well, was that just to nod of him of like the dance that he's going to show him, or I didn't know why that little boogie was there.
I saw that as just showing more essence that he's a flickering flame.
Okay, I thought we were on Present. Now I'm caught up.
Yeah, past it a little boogie.
Yeah. Also a little flicker of his head. So I just think that's into just like, this guy's a candle.
Quite possibly.
Perhaps. I don't know, it just kind of stood out as being weird because they focused on it a little long. So
what I thought was weird,
stuff.
I think, I don't know if it's going from like I think it's from the party to the office with Belle, but Past puts the cap over his own head, and then Scrooge does it, but when Scrooge does it purposefully, it like kills him. But then he can just do it to himself and there's no repercussion.
Don't know what to tell you. Inconsistencies.
Well, I mean, when Scrooge does it, time was up, right? So that's just how it was supposed to end.
True, but he covered himself, and then there's still more Past to show.
Well, obviously, it didn't extinguish him because he shot him up into space.
Well, yeah, but I guess it also goes with like yet to come's traversal methods. Like this is Past getting him to a different point, but differently. And I think it's just for the sake of the film to show that now it's more of a saddening thing to go to a sad scene, so it's getting a darker fade, like a fade to black for the scene, opposed to, flying and all whimsical kind of thing. Because then it would have been a tone change.
No, I'm lost. Is this before or after the shooting into space?
Before.
Okay.
I believe this is when.
So they undercut
Scrooge,
what you just described with the rocket, then?
No, well, no. What Belle and Scrooge see each other it then, I believe it's that scene, Past puts the cap over their head so it fades to black and darkness because it's going into the dark scene of the whole Bell talk. And then they're in the bedroom chamber when Scrooge purposely puts it over, which actually extinguishes him or kills him. But there's nothing shown of like when they're with Bell, Past is just totally fine in there. It's not like taking the cap off to show like it didn't actually affect them or the cap's even.
I thought they were still in the
situation.
office, or the work office when he was forcing the cap onto Past.
Oh, they're in the office
yeah,
when he covers it?
I think so.
Okay.
It's
Maybe I'm
dark.
just remembering that wrong.
It's dark. It's fine. The same problem.
I
still
just
exists.
think the usage. Yeah, I just think the usage of it is just for a tone keeper to go into a darker, saddening part, opposed to the consistency of the character not having the cap on their head.
Okay.
It also shows off that Past emits light then.
Oh, yeah, Past is a light, so emitting light would make sense. I also don't think he got killed by Scrooge either, because the whole shooting him into space.
Yeah,
that was Past just fucking with him one more time, I guess. I don't know. Funny enough, since we're on the Bell's kind of goodbye scene, I thought young Scrooge looked a lot like Neil Patrick Harris, which for me just connected me to the Lemony Snicket versions of the character they played in. Those they're separate like versions of that character.
Very interesting of you to say that. Ryder, have you seen the movie
Yes, I have.
of Lemony Snicket's?
I have.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
Even weirder then. Because that's Jim Carrey as Count Olaf in the movie.
Yeah, I know. That's why I made the connection, because I saw Neil Patrick Harris's young version of Scrooge. I'm like, oh, that's funny because they both played Count Olaf in their respective versions of their franchises, I guess.
Oh.
So yeah, that was a humorous little tidbit that happened for me since I was watching it, because I've seen the movie.
Sorry, but the things you've shared of what you have and have not seen or heard of.
Yeah.
Just
surprisingly,
curious.
I'm surprised you've seen the show.
Nah, I watched the show for a movie night. The show was good. I liked it. But yeah, no, I understand the trepidation. No, but that version of the series of unfortunate events, I've seen both, so I like them both for different reasons.
All right, we'll talk about Belle, because it's like Bob. We usually have like a Belle section. What about Belle? Well, we'll start with Frank's thoughts on Belle.
She's not my favorite Belle, but this might be my favorite Belle scene. Because this is an actual conversation between the two characters. Opposed from the 30s one where it's literally nothing Scrooge says at all and she's so fast of a decision making, which I think is the worst overall. The 80s one, which is just her giving a answer to Scrooge and walking off. The Muppet one, which is Belle's whole scene and a lot about her character through the words of that song in the extended version. And then this one is actually just a back and forth of the two characters of how they feel about the situation they're in. And I think this one's the strongest part of that.
See that? How about you, Ryder?
Like with a lot of things in this film, I think this has I think the strongest Belle scene outside of Michael Caine crying with the song. I think this might have one of the strongest scenes with the two characters because, again, like Spring said, there's an actual conversation that's had here. All that said, as a preface and caveat, I don't think there's a lot going on with this Belle. They danced, and then we cut pretty much hard to this.
Did they even dance? They just look at each other.
They danced.
Oh, they danced.
They danced, and the whole room faded to black around them, kind of implying that. Yeah. So they danced, and then we pretty much cut to this. So I do think there's a lot of what would make this scene putting the scene from great into perfect would be that all the support stuff that would need to be there. I don't think any of it's there. I don't even think we get an after scene with Belle where she's off like with her new family being happy. So we don't
Oh,
really
with her
get
17 children?
yeah with her 17 children. We don't get any closure with this Belle, which is fine because this film is focusing directly on Scrooge. But I think that does make this version of Belle a bit weaker than her counterparts. That's said, still probably my favorite Belle scene because of the conversation.
Yeah, I'm personally deciding whether or not I think this Belle's on par with 35 Belle. Because I
Ouch.
felt nothing with this Belle. I didn't feel the chemistry or love between these two characters. There's no like talking scene at the party. It's just they look at each other and then they dance, and then we fade to them breaking up. And yeah, there is no afterwards either. Her success in life and Scrooge seeing what could have been with him and her, that's all absent. This them having a conversation is fine, but because I didn't feel any actual passion between these two characters, because we didn't build any, she felt like nothing. Belle was very hollow in this.
I guess that's fair. I think my I guess my not really a retort, but my interpretation of that is just they imply all the chemistry and history, which doesn't really work as well as they think it does in this instance.
I mean, the only implication is they've been together for a while. That's
Yeah.
It's an implied love. That's it. We don't get anything. So yeah, the spell was hollow to me, as hollow as the 35 one. This one had the talk, so I guess it's a bit better than the 35 one. I think 80 is my favorite personally, and then the Muppets one. But those two are definitely far better than this iteration.
I would agree. And this would be because we're only tiering 4. I do think this, while it has my favorite Belle scene, I would probably tier her on the third of the 4.
I think I have her as the second.
Better than 80s one for
Who's
you?
your third?
I'm guessing.
Yeah, over the 80s one.
Out of curiosity, why? Or what put this one above for you?
This one actually has a matured back and forth with Scrooge of characters, as opposed to the 80s one was just her revealing what Scrooge wants, and then the tone of the film with the fanfare or whatever music choices it is just Scrooge's perspective on Belle's character. I saw it. The aftermath of the husband in the future, or I guess whatever time period that is, of Belle being like, "Oh, I felt sorry for poor old Scrooge," so she remembers him. But with the 80s, is that in the 30s one too? The 30s one is like uncaring, really, and that's the bottom of my list. She really doesn't give Scrooge a window to say a damn thing.
Well, the 30s one is just, it's so weird because, like, in that one, she also just shows up to work to confirm that Scrooge is a bad person and then breaks up with him. So
yeah, she oversees a rumor out of context.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, we're off.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that make that one, at least, for me.
That one stinks. Now, the real tricky thing is if it wasn't for the extended song of Muppets, I might had this one as number 1.
You really value this conversation, huh?
It really just shows the maturity of the character. The song really plays into Belle's character in the Muppets one.
Yeah.
And really strengthens.
She's not much of a character without that song.
Yeah. But it actually shows a personalization or perspective of the character of Belle and not just what Scrooge sees of the person. It's actually the effect of what Scrooge had on her.
All right, that's my Belle question. Who the heck? This writer. It's been a while.
All right, sure. Let's see. I think it's funny because it's slapstick, but it does bother me a little bit when Scrooge falls backwards on icy steps and he's an old man and like didn't break a bone.
Oh, he would have broken his back.
Yeah, he didn't break his backbone.
Oh my
or anything.
god, he walked it off.
Yeah, he fucking got up.
He
and
wasn't
walked it off.
injured.
Yeah, he did. And the same thing when he falls off the bed, where he's like, it kind of feels like he jumped off the bed and he landed face first onto the ground and he didn't break his neck. I'm like, I feel for this old man a lot, but because everything else is so grounded, like stuff like that and the dancing really stick out to me. That was like, all right, that's plot armor. Is literally what I wrote down as.
Fell off the bed.
That-
What instance?
This old man has the best stamina ever. He outruns the ghost carriage. He balances on a giant icicle
It's so
that's
much
going
worse.
down a rooftop.
It's so much worse.
It's
than you
so
think,
bad.
because he's shrinking while he's running away from the carriage, so he should be gaining less ground.
Yeah, that the icicle I go with the shrinking of the carriage I don't, because I saw that played off as like a nightmare sense. Like how like you're always running from something, the walls are closing in on you. I think it was really played off to look like a nightmare. And I think that was just orchestrated to be like that from Yet to Come for a scare tactic.
It could.
Otherwise,
work.
absolutely,
It could,
the hearse would have caught up. He's small.
It could work, but the way that they play this scene, I do think that the carriage would have caught up with him.
Oh, absolutely. But I
Well,
just
he's an
see
old
it as
man.
all controlled.
Yeah. So yeah, this Scrooge has some.
I mean,
plot
Yet to
armor.
Come is Scrooge's shadow and has connected him at all times. Yet to Come could have taken over Scrooge's direction any point.
Yeah.
He's always a part of him. So, like, the whole hand lingering to get closer is just a scary scene.
Well, Sprinks, you're on like future is always, or he's pushing Scrooge to the item room or whatever, the
Fence.
fence. There's no way he could have predicted the whole Ice Cube stuff. What if Scrooge slipped off that roof? Why is he on the roof? He could have exited the can and gone somewhere else. Or I said can, pipe, whatever. But he's not controlling him in those aspects. There's a lot of what ifs.
I just think Yet to Come would have been there to steer him in the right direction. Because the whole sewer drain just pops him out towards the direction. It's not an actual sewer system.
Yeah, I'm still gonna call that plot armor. It just falls into the same label for me.
Sprinks, you're up.
I like the usage of when to choose not to have any sound or music or Foley or anything. And this is when Scrooge is walking home before the door knocker of seeing Marley's face. And outside is on the sidewalk, it's dead silent. The only sound is him walking. And I think that really helps go with a tone of what's to come.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the shadow that you see on the wall first before you see him walk into frame. I like that.
Yeah.
And then the same way, why I really, really like this Yet to Come's Spirit's entrance is because it's dead quiet after everything was super loud with presents like laughing to death and stuff like that. Obviously just the silence of the shadow that future Coast of Christmas Future takes. Just same vibe for me. I really liked the quiet sometimes this film goes because everything else is so loud and obnoxious. It makes those quiet moments stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, especially coming right off of Bob ice skating with the kids, of being all jolly, and then to this.
And I think the silence leading up to Jacob Marley's ghost on the door knocker, because usually in films that have a jump scare, you notice, oh, it just got silent. There's a jump scare coming. In this, because the silence was so long, at least I wasn't expecting a jump scare because it was so prolonged. It didn't stand out as being it's setting up for something.
Yeah, there's a lot of they gave it enough build up, you know.
Yeah. So much so that you're not on guard expecting a jump scare. You being at least me anyways. And I didn't get scared for that. Did either of you?
No. This is our
It was a
fourth
good
time
one.
watching it. I know what's coming.
Well, you didn't know Jacob Marley was going to play. You-
Especially, I knew it was coming
That's the
because
jump scare.
I knew he was
Well-
coming because Jim Carrey Scrooge was reaching for it, like the knob. So I'm like, oh, so he's gonna. My thought was, oh, he's gonna jump scare.
It was highly predictable.
Jump scares rarely get me, and I think that still one of the few ones that got everybody was the one from The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, that car. Out of nowhere.
Yeah, that one. There was no build up to that one, which was, and they don't really use jump scares, so it felt like the right time to use it in a way. I do like that Present is aging throughout the day in the same way that the way I like the Muppets, like red hair is slowly graying. This one also very similar. The red hair is slowly graying as time goes on.
Yeah, this one's a clear indication he's dead.
I don't know. He
This
could
is
still be kicking as dust.
no.
You don't know.
Uh-uh. The
Yeah.
30s gone. The 80s kind of fades. The Muppets one old and sparkly and disappears. This one's a heart attack dead.
Yeah. My only issue with his skeleton is that his teeth were still there.
Yeah, well, his eyes were still there. It wasn't just a skull.
Yeah. But I mean, like, he lost everything else, like all the ligaments that would hold those organs in place, and like your jaw tissue. So, like, it's a minor thing, but I appreciate the visual of him smiling as he's dead because it's very in character for Present, I guess.
Oh, he was a laughing loon.
Yeah, it was almost getting annoying how much this version was laughing.
No.
Laughing at
Almost.
everything.
I liked it.
I'm saying in a general sense, not his death. I liked he was laughing to death.
Again, tiny bit that I really enjoyed was Present when he was flying around in their observation room. I really enjoyed the stops that he made along the way to Bob Cratchit's house, because again, showing the world off in a heavenly view, but again, it's also showing the world off as well. Like the world's enjoying Christmas time. I'm gonna specify. And it's fitting is what it is. Like, I think because again, one of the things I liked about the 35 version was the cutaways to see how the rest of the world was celebrating Christmas to contrast with the Scrooge. So I like that this film is doing that as well, and it's just a different way.
Yeah, I agree. Do you agree, Sprinks?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that a Present doesn't just go to like 2 stops and is done for the showing of the night. It actually shows like multiple facets of multiple people, I guess, around London, but just how anyone else celebrates Christmas Day.
It was nice. Something I quite like that they did was when Scrooge gets plopped into the future with the guys that are talking about someone died, he's on the floor as if he's their shadow.
That's
and
pretty
that
cool.
interesting.
That is cool.
Mm-hmm. There's my potential symbolisms for you. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's what I read.
And it's
Being
rare out
into
of you
that.
to share one of those.
Awesome.
Also, I'll go with he isn't breaking bones falling down, rolling down those stairs, because those stairs are kind of forged and fake.
Well,
Yeah.
we've always debated how real are these scenarios. Is this all in his head and he's just in bed? Or is he actually traveling? Well, who knows?
If I see a version where Scrooge wakes up Christmas morning with black eyes and like a swollen lip, and then I'll be like, oh, interesting.
Or losing a couple toes because of frostbite or something. That'd be pretty funny.
Oh, like at World's End, breaks his toe
That'd be
off.
brutal. Yeah. That'd be interesting.
All right, I brought this up in past versions. I'll bring it up in this one. This is the best looking, specifically looking, shadow of the candle that he lights in his house.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that, so I was paying extra
Really good.
attention to it.
However, I think I have to disqualify it because it's animated.
I mean, I still think there's even an issue with it because when he turns to go up the stairs are already lit. It's not the candlelight lighting the stairs until he moves. Then you can see the light asset of the candle moving.
Yeah, but he had a housekeeper in the 30s one. But then again, that was a spotlight because it was stage. So. Hey, audience. Sprinks here from the future. The next couple minutes here, writer's audio went up and vanished. So rather than like just cutting out the whole conversation of Crimson and I'll keep it in, but it's cutting out the parts where writer would be speaking, but there's nothing there, so the context is going to be a little off. But I didn't want to take everything out for you. So hopefully you still get it.
I guess an animation error I caught, and it was pretty prevalent throughout, was the snow. There. Oh, what did you catch with the snow? Okay. I didn't have too much issue with that because I kind of saw that as part of the art style for this, but they weren't leaving footprints in the snow. There was, and the part that I started picking it up on was very early, while he's entering uh, their place, Marley and Scrooge's, and there are footprints in the snow, but it's not him making them. They were already there from other people, but you could see where he's walking isn't leaving any footprints. So it was just like a, a rendered asset that they used on the ground. It wasn't actual snow assets. No particle effects for it. And I did like the sign aging through the 7-year jump. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't tell you how much time has passed, but it would show that time has passed. Sprinks.
I guess another connection to cinematography that was very similar to me, previous works from Polar Express, was when Scrooge is in his chair in his bedside chamber before Jacob arrives with the telling of the bells, and the camera kind of goes into the wall to get the angle of the bell. Reminded me very much of the camera in Polar Express going into the ice in the North Pole when the boy leans down to pick up the bell off of the reins. Kind of like a placement where a camera couldn't be to get such an angle, which I guess goes into maybe the question you brought up, Crimson, of like what they could get away with animation. And I think this is one of those instances because I don't think a camera could have done that unless it's extremely small and the wall wasn't there.
Well, then you would just say they do CGI for the shot, but yeah, that would fall under capitalizing on animation. Yeah, you can answer first.
I think it can show change in him. But it's also this present's first stop to show on, so it's to get the reaction out of Scrooge first. So I don't think it's a breaking character because it's a question to be brought up anyhow of why this is being shown to him. Yeah,
Yeah,
but President decides to start there.
And the question is, would Scrooge ask about the bread? Or why he cares about the people? Yeah. I'm leaning towards there's nothing in the past that would even show growth towards him caring about others. It was all personal stuff. So I don't think if that's what they're going for, I don't think they built that in the past of him starting to care for others. So no. And when I brought up the bread thing earlier, I did bring up how I thought he was out of character for bringing up the question. So I do think he's out of character.
Yeah, I don't think it's more so on the either end of those two options. I think it's just him questioning to a conversation of present of why they're there.
That's not the question that Scrooge asked, though. Scrooge didn't ask, "Why are we here?" He
No.
asked, "Why do you close down bakeries for people that need food?" That's the question. That's that's him caring.
I didn't. I just see more curiosity than care.
Why is Scrooge curious then? That's not really a character trait of him either.
It seems more likely to be on a first stop, chosen by present to ask something than sit in awkward silence, like we're doing right now.
I don't know how to respond to that answer. uh, all right, I guess anything more on that?
No, that was my question.
I think it would have been a different conversation or questions asked if this was after viewing Fred's and the Cratchits. If it was like the 30s that way.
Yeah, I mean, its placement being the last thing of present, other than his death stuff, obviously. But it would be a better placement because at that point he would kind of start caring because he's supposed to care about Tim at some point. So
And the state that the Cratchits are in, because they're not well off.
Yeah.
So
it would play more into care.
Yeah, but being shown first in what we have of Scrooge as a character, I don't think he would, one, care, or two, be curious enough to ask about why you close bakeries on Sundays for people who need it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it boils down to for me of why I think it's out of character. I think it's just inconsistent with this particular. Again, it's inconsistent with this Scrooge. We don't really have what's it called? Those character traits of curiosity and caring are not there up until this point, which is why I view it as a bit. I like the idea behind everything that comes out of the scene, but it's out of character for Scrooge to be the one to bring it up. Like Present can start talking about the bakeries, and he could incite the question with something that he says, and there the rest of the scene can play out as it does. But we don't get that. Scrooge directly asks Present. That's my question.
And future Scrooge asks him to show him someone who feels something about his death, and we see two people talking about being able to pay off their debts or whatever. Was that Fred or someone else?
That was not Fred. I think that's just some stranger we'd never seen. But the implication is that he was one of the lenders that Scrooge loaned money to.
Oh, the Vision Yet to Come shows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like Applegate from Muppets.
Yeah, Applegate from Muppets, or the people that Belle saw him like being really hard to in their 35 version.
Okay, so this guy was a nobody in this iteration.
Yes.
So some random guy we don't know yet.
Yeah, there's been no like previous showing of this character.
Yeah, no name, but someone who actually has joy over and comfort for the passing of Scrooge.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
I
problem.
think that was the worst case scenario of an answer there. Because
Yeah.
if you guys were like, "Oh, it's Fred," I'm like, "Okay," but if it's a character we don't have established, I have an issue with that. Something we talked about in the other versions was seeing Scrooge's business. In this, we don't get Scrooge business. He's not shaking down somebody for their money. He's not talking about the corn deal in the 80s one. We get no business side of him other than he's counting money at his table. So we have these people that are directly tied to his business, but we don't have an actual scene with them.
We don't have any reference
anything.
for them until this point. Yeah, I agree. There's no build up for it. It's one of the things this
There's
film
no
does.
groundwork.
Yeah, it's one of the things this film does a lot. It either does something really, really well in isolation, but forgets to build stuff up.
And what do you think on that, Sprinks?
I think it's great because it's what Scrooge asked for, and there's someone out there who has it.
But what about as a film?
I think it's still great. It doesn't have to be front load backstory onto who Scrooge is. It shows part of his work now
Oh,
towards someone.
oh, I could. Okay, I'm gonna make a comparison. I'm gonna take us back to our Beth Cooper towel discussion for a second.
Way
That scene was injected, and you had an issue with that because there was ways to build up to it. My argument was we needed that in the film because without that backstory, then it would be superfluous. This character trait comes out of nowhere, and I still in agreement with you. It would be better if that was in previous parts of the film. My issue with this is that it's injected with no backstory, and you like it because it's here because we don't have any backstory to it. So my question to you is, what's the difference?
Well, the Beth Cooper Hal thing don't retain much knowledge on that whatsoever. So you're more creditable for that than I do. I like it here because it shows to Scrooge an answer of one person who's actually comforted by the fact of it, which is a complete nobody. Scrooge might not even recognize who the heck this person is, but over the death of him, and maybe it plays into more that there's no name of the character. Like, they don't call each other names like this couple to give more so into Scrooge not knowing who they are. And I think that's just, in a way, showing another sorrow in a different aspect and light onto Scrooge's passing.
And then how does this not violate your one-time rule?
Well, there's only one.
Yeah.
Are you asking would I preferred it if Yet to Come didn't show anyone, like no one had comfort of Scrooge's passing?
No.
We're
Scrooge
saying there's
That's
no
not what I'm
groundwork for
suggesting.
these people.
I don't think there needs to be. What groundwork does there need? Should they have visited earlier on, like before the charity workers or Fred on Christmas Eve?
You've said before that when something there's multiple facets of where I guess I'm confuddled on your stance on this. So the first one I'll focus on, I guess, would be the one of the things you have often said on the podcast is if something happens only once, you typically have a problem with it. So why is them not having a backstory? You said you love this scene. I agree, it's a good scene. There's nothing to support it or build it, though, because it's just here, dropped in out of the middle of nowhere. And you can argue that it comes from tragedy or whatever, why Scrooge doesn't remember them, or insert that reason wherever here. The problem with that is this is a first time for the audience. So it's done as it would theoretically be an adaptation portrayal problem.
Possibly. I don't recall if it's in the book or not.
I'm not saying necessarily from the book. So adaptation is not the right word. How best to describe this? Integration, yeah. There is there is an issue with this integration because the audience doesn't know who these people are.
I don't see it as such because I don't know why they need to be known who they are. I think there's enough context in their little window of showing how they're connected to Scrooge.
Okay. So then my issue then turns to one of your things, which is, again, turns into one of your things is why is your one rule not applied to this? Thing not applied to this?
I think what helps my one rule is the objectively making of the film and usages of such, and not the subjective take of scenes.
This isn't a subjective take.
But for me, it is.
So you so then I have nothing else to say. If it's subjective for you to like this scene, because I agree.
Yeah.
I see it's subjective.
Because then it gets real weird. Then for my one rule take of something, then it's like, why is there only one Scrooge? Why is there only one Bob Cratchit? Why is there only one day shown? Why is there only one present? Why is there? then that's ridiculous. If it's the subjective of one thing for anything.
No. I'm not saying that. My issue has been your inconsistency with regards to this particular. I guess with this, because this feels like it violates a lot of the things you've said in previous podcasts. In the ways that you've argued against something or for something, because this one just happened to strike you in the right way and fancy. So you're not arguing that the scene is objectively good. You're arguing that it's you subjectively like it. In which case, I don't have a problem.
Yes, I think
Okay.
I followed all that.
All right, then we're good. Because I agree. I like this scene. I think objectively it needs support or setup.
Sprinks, answer a question that you posed in the middle of that somewhere was, would we have preferred to have them earlier in the film? And I would say yes, because that happened in other iterations. We had debtors earlier in the films before. We don't get that in this. This is the first time. I even had to ask you guys if it was Fred, because I didn't know who the heck these people were. So that's my piece on it. Sprinks, you're up.
Oh boy. I suppose this is more a question on the writer, being the writer of the group here. In the dialogue used of Jacob Marley expressing when the spirits are to occur, to me it was very confusing on the terminology he was using in his sentence structure of what he meant. And I think it works, but it's so confusing.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did he say like the next 3 nights you're going to be visited by 3 ghosts or something like that?
Not exactly. He said upon
night one.
I didn't write it down, but upon the next night you will be visited by a strike. And then he says, and then the next night you will be by a following on the second time, and then by the third. Yeah, by the same hour. But in context, I think it still works because you could still be referring to the day he's visiting and not of the context of after the first bell.
I had written down notes for this one because I was also confused about the dialogue. I thought that they were going to be doing like 1 ghost a night by the way it sounded, but if that's the way that was phrased, I don't know if I have a big issue with it.
I mean, the way they said it was pretty much 1 ghost a night. I do have an answer for this, by the way. I found this during my fact hunting. But if you guys want to...
All right, go ahead.
Theory craft.
Well, I don't have a theory craft.
I don't want to cut off.
Okay.
Is there anything proving that upon a visit from a spirit, when Scrooge is back in his bed, it hasn't been a whole 23 extra hours to pass?
Well,
he's
the
still alive.
He
could be dehydrated and dead by the 3rd day, but...
Well, it's Christmas Eve and then it's Christmas Day the next. So unless they take them a day each and then just rewind it back, which would just be redundant.
What do you mean Christmas Eve first?
Well, it's Christmas Eve when he goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's Christmas Day when he's visited by the first spirit.
Well, yeah, because he goes past midnight, whatever. It's the same day.
Okay.
What would you when you mean it could have been different days? What you just said.
I don't. I'm not saying it could have been different days.
Okay.
I think the movie conveys that it is the same night. Which is why the tricky wording of Jacob Marley was tricky.
My first initial read of that is just the dialogue was wrong. So I don't really have a theory craft because I know that the ghosts go off and do all this in 1 night because we get the line at the end. Oh, they did it all in 1 night. So I found Marley's wording. I didn't really do a second look. I just wrote it down like that's interesting if they decide to do this 1 night at a time.
This is an example, I would say, of a damage of an adaptation. Something that the other films that we covered fixed from the book. This line is from the book, and it's an error. The other movies we covered rectified it by saying, each hour or whatever. Whatever versions we saw, because they had different times. But the book, this is from the book, the lines that were used. The next day on the same hour, same thing. It's from the book. The other iterations fixed that line because it's an error.
Oh, good job for the adaptation department, I guess.
So how does that affect you, Spranks?
How is it an error?
Because it doesn't fit the one night thing.
Well, that
You can't have 3 days in one day. That's not how it works.
that's the thing. We're just going back to what my original question was of the terminology. Is the context of what Jacob Marley, because it's showing one night throughout the usage of the movie, especially with the example that Ryder gave on the third night, he would be frail from dehydration. Would the context be of Jacob Marley referring to the current day of his visit upon the next night? Because then that would be Christmas for each night he's stating of the bell being tolled for the spirit's arrival. Because then it works fine. It's just tricky the way he worded it, which I could say is if it's a direct adaptation or direct wordage from the literature of the book, then that's just the time period of how the wording goes and not modernized, which makes it confusing.
From what I saw in the research, it was stated as an error in the book. That's all I'll say. Someone else's words, from what I read, said it was an error from the book.
Then I got my hands in the air and I'm a big shrug. Because that's why I brought up the question to begin with. I didn't know if it's just old-timey language that doesn't make sense to modern ears for me, or if it fits, or if it's bad writing, or...
Could you do me a favor, Springs, and write it in the chat so I can read it real quick?
Well, I didn't write it
He
down,
doesn't have it
but
written.
Oh,
Maybe recap.
yeah.
yeah.
Cover it.
Don't worry, audience. We'll figure this out.
Potential problem.
Right,
Let's put a sticky note on it.
Yeah. Ryder.
Let's see. What do we think of this version of Presence reading Scrooge's lines back to him? Or saying Scrooge's lines back to him?
Felt goofy.
I think it's fine. It's like a 6 out of 10 for me. It's fine.
I think 80s still takes it. At least the victory lap for it. But I think this one works for this present. Because this present isn't as confrontational. But he's very... he has a large presence. But... so...
I think it works within the film, but I think it came off as goofy.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think something to aid, which I do like about this version of the film, is all the spirits are played by Jim Carrey.
Yeah, he worked hard on Yet to Come.
Yeah. But I like that because then they're all physically in some form connected to Scrooge. Like they're all a connection of who Scrooge is and his connection of time. And it's not just kind of like random portrayals. So I do like that incorporation into it.
I would like it if we could tell.
I can tell the best with Past. Past does look like Jim Carrey, I think. The beard really covers Present, and then Yet to Come has no face.
I didn't get that at all. That's cool. Didn't get it at all.
Something I liked in this was Miss Dilber. She's somewhat of a character in this now, because he had a maid before, but she was just a maid. She wasn't much of a character or anything. And we've had people go to the fence, but they haven't really been confirmed to be anyone that worked for Scrooge. But this connected those dots, and I think that's a very good positive for that.
I think the 35 version
the
does
30s?
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Did it?
35 version did that, yeah.
Yeah. Because he's like dancing with her, and
Yeah,
she's like shining his shoes in his bedroom or something like that.
This one, Scrooge is a little more flirtatious towards, but
I mean, he danced with the other maid, but I don't think they made the connection between the maid and the fence.
Well, I asked about this if the maid was... Yeah, I thought the maid was with the fence. I remember asking about that at the end of that film.
However, this one, there's only one, which is just Mrs. Dilber. In the 30s, there was 3 of them, but one of them is the maid. But I think there was like context saying like one was a maid, one was the chef, one was a Taylor or something like that. Can't recall. The Muppets one, I think they're just thieves. I don't know if they're connected at all to Scrooge. And the 80s one, I don't recall much. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I like this integration here.
I like how she thinks he's a raging lunatic.
He's gone
He's
mad.
gone mad.
I mean, if you see your boss suddenly, slide down the stairs,
Screaming Merry Christmas.
yeah, I'd be a little freaked out, considering this is supposed to be Scrooge. I think it's a very reasonable. I think her reaction's very reasonable.
Actually, I guess that was the comedy just overall in this tonnage of movie doesn't fully work at a lot of times. And Ryder, you brought up how one works is Present picking up Scrooge. I think one I think is fine is when Mrs. Dilber's selling the stuff to Joe and Scrooge is just yelling, "You're fired." I think
Mr.
that
Dilbert, you're
works.
fired.
I would have agreed if it wasn't the squeaky voice. I don't know. I guess the squeaky voice really grates on me in this particular film. So, well, it grates on me in a lot of films. There's a reason why I don't like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Interesting.
I'm sure the writing's
A little
fine.
foresight.
Yeah, I'm sure the writing's fine. I'm just, I don't like the film subjectively.
Well, let's see. So Scrooge does the trick on Bob. Bob is 16 minutes late, which we've talked about in other coverages. A little odd for Bob, but it's fine. He had a great day before. How do you guys feel about the Ray's reveal on this one compared to the other ones we've covered?
I think it's good of Scrooge. I don't think it's good for Bob.
You want to elaborate?
I like the portrayal of this Scrooge being so jolly and changed and for Bob and great for Bob. Bob doesn't have a lot to show. I think he's just in shock. And it kind of reminds me of the 80s one where the 80s one was in shock but said thank you in confusion with a smile. This Bob was very just still shocked till he was like out the door to go get coal.
Characters.
And then
he turned into a narrator.
Yeah. But there wasn't really like anything out of this Bob other than shock.
Yeah, and it's weird because especially since they actually show the more whimsical side of this Bob, so I would have much preferred to get a reaction from this Bob in the same way we got one from the charity worker, watching how not recognizing Scrooge and stuff like that.
Yeah,
just
even
like
if something minor of like if Bob was going to question, goes like Mr. Scrooge, right, and then Scrooge cuts him off. It's like no, not a word more, go something like that. If they wanted to, go around it, it just really just plays in the shock value, which focuses far more on Scrooge than with all the dialogue he's spurting out. Which kind of goes
felt like a
into
wet blanket.
other scenes for me.
Yeah,
Right, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing. This is an instance where the animation style kind of holds it back because I think if that was actually Gary Oldman, like in the room, like it was a live action scene, right? I actually do think Gary Oldman is a good enough actor to give us everything we would want just in the acting, if that makes sense.
Well, Ryder, I'll let you know, it kind of was.
Yeah, I know, but like I'm saying that like if this was live action, the nuances of the acting would be a little more obvious.
Facial mocap is still a little different, Sprinks.
It is, but it's still two physical beings in the room acting.
Yeah. Okay. There's a point where I would agree with you. Anything like mocap,
it's not voices in a booth where they never see each other.
Yeah. If with the mocap acting, the interesting thing is that like the later date it is, the better that concept becomes because obviously they hadn't quite gotten facial animations super well done yet at this point.
This is not Caesar from Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of nuance that comes with that. So it works, but this is one of those instances. I think this is too far. This is too far in the 2000s to to I guess have gotten the acting portrayal from Gary Oldman in the sense that where it would have worked as best as possible.
I suppose so, but also for me, like, I can't really see Gary Oldman in this Bob Cratchit. Like, it's just so caked on of like a different face look. For his like example, Polar Express, which I believe was 5 years prior to this, all the Tom Hanks roles come across as Tom Hanks. And maybe that's just something I don't see in this one that I see in that, but
I see what you're saying, and I agree with that. And
like
with
Colin
facial,
Firth as Fred, I can see that. Jim Carrey as Scrooge, I can see him in there. Bob Hoskins as Fezziwig, absolutely. That's probably the easiest one for me to see. But Gary Oldman here as Bob Cratchit, I can barely see it.
Yeah, I
I
see
can't
Gary
really see it at
Oldman
all.
more in Marley than I do see him in Bob Cratchit.
Now it
For the-
sounds like him. I don't want to dismerit that nothing of this Bob character is Gary Oldman, not at all. But his voice is clearly Gary. But just the hiddenness of the mocap in the face is hard to tell.
and I like to point out for mocap, facial mocap, it's not a one-for-one transfer. The artists actually tweak the mocap. That this is not just Gary Oldman's face. This is an artist moving his face and exaggerating features, stuff like that. I mean, a lot of Scrooge's faces, Jim Carrey can do a lot of crazy faces, but there is some exaggeration in this past what Jim Carrey is capable of for like how
That's
wide
true.
his mouth can open. That's just facial animation with mocap. It's actor plus artist. Well,
I mean,
you know what
in Polar Express, the boy doesn't really look like Tom Hanks, even though it's mocapped him. But in Mars Needs Moms, that kid looks like Seth Green.
Yes, it does. Let's see. What was the original? Oh, how the scene went. Ryder, did you answer how that was?
Let's see. Did I? Don't remember, but I'll answer it again.
I don't
Bob
speak
Cratchit in shock.
Yeah, Bob Cratchit's in shock. It's pretty much what it is. I wanted more from it.
So much in shock, he changes character.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It works, but again, I think this is something where it's just I know the actor could do a better job in live action than he could with this. I think it's kind of what it boiled down to for me because I think Bob Cratchit being in shock and not getting much more from that, I think is something that can work really, really well if you have the right actor playing it. Because you almost get that with the 80s version, even though you get the extra, like, thank you, sir, kind of. And that Bob's very stern, so.
You know,
Yeah, that one's different.
you pitched if the animation was overutilized. I think
Mhm.
Gary Oldman's acting might be underutilized in this movie.
I can agree because what I was saying about Bob earlier was the few moments we get of him where he is more subdued and not the boisterous, happy guy that's outside ice skating. He is like a weird 50-50 Bob, opposed to our other Bobs where we're like the 30s Bob is the 100% joyful, the 80s is the more normal, mellow man, and Muppets
Is a
I
frog.
guess is a yeah yeah.
Hey.
I saw Kermit as
Oscar-worthy
more
actor,
subdued,
okay?
No, the
But this
Muppets
Bob's
one's
a mix.
is subtle. This one's a mix. I think the 30s one's very black and white.
nice one.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So yeah, I think this was kind of a wet blanket for their exchange. I do agree with you, Springs, with Scrooge. I think his very jubilant excitement for his new life going forward was good.
Do you think these actors did the best they could with what they had?
I would like to think that of any actor. And we have some veterans in this one, so I would say yes, they probably did the best they could.
I mean, Carrie Elways was in this movie, and it's such a throwaway character he is.
Like,
He plays Dick, the Dick Richardsons or whatever.
Yeah. Got like 1.5 lines.
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, there's probably some degree of like you feel ridiculous in a mocap suit. Not that that's an excuse, but not all these actors are used to doing that normally, you know.
That's true.
So, like, you know, I do think there are actors here who do utilize or who are fully utilized, like Colin Firth and Jim Carrey. I do think they do give it their all for the briefest moments that, you know, Colin Firth is there. I do feel the actor coming through the character.
Yeah, not everyone's
Like, I
Andy
think-
Serkis.
Yeah, it's true.
No,
I
but I
wish.
think Gary Oldman did his damnedest at what he had for Bob.
Yeah, and like I said, the Bob is very hollow in this film, and that's one of my issues with this film is a lot of the side characters because it's focuses so much on Scrooge and the aforementioned wasting time. A lot of those side characters feel a little more hollow because of it.
And it kind of worsens it for how much it's focused on Scrooge, and it's not a gradual change.
Yep.
Yep.
That goes back to what I said
Scrooge.
earlier. Yeah.
And with Bob's very interesting because in this one we do have what we had in the 30s of Dead Tim, not exactly the same, but a variant, and him by himself being emotional on the stairs. I found it interesting that the emotional part was him on the stairs and not Tim's room. As a viewer, they focused more on Scrooge's perception of Bob's sadness than actually Bob's sadness. Found that interesting. Not
Yes,
necessarily
but
that
I
it's
think
a
it's still-
bad thing, but
No, it still
it's an
completely
interesting
works.
decision.
Yeah. I think a lot of it's as well as to show the kind of like the unintentional effect that Scrooge does actually have on Bob's life. And it's one of those moments that I think does work at the core of changing Scrooge's character. But again, it's not a gradual change, is the problem, you know. Because I think I talked about this a little earlier in the podcast. Like, I think this is a nice blend of what I actually like, because we still get the whole family mourning together bit, and we get Bob mourning separately, which I find that those both being equally important. So there's still the mourning with the family; they're all being there together and supporting each other. And then we still get him mourning by himself, and like bracing himself to go up to see his dead son.
Yeah. How are you guys' notes looking? Thin or still got a fair amount?
Well, being popcorn, I can't exactly tell.
That's a fair point.
I have gone through a whole page. I'll say that.
I think I can got a couple more.
I take it you pitch it because you don't have many yourself, Crimson?
Well, no, because it's popcorn. I was just gauging people's levels.
Yeah,
I guess Sprinks, you can go, or Ryder, whoever. I don't care.
Springs, he called you first.
Okay, I'm like, make a decision. Damn it. When Past is introduced, and it kind of has a spotlight of Scrooge in his bed, and it's like looking at the ceiling of it, and looks around until it stops on Scrooge's face. We then see that that's the top of Past's head and not the face of Past.
Yeah.
So is it just like ghost thing, like something I can't comprehend because it's not the depicted eyes of the ghost, or?
Well, we see a little bit of it where it's not necessarily the top of his head. It's kind of the tip of the flame, and he can point the tip of the flame to direct the beam of light. You can tell this when he's guiding Scrooge towards the window. So it's more like the tip of his head is like a lamp he can move, and it's not just a direct beam going straight up.
Okay.
I like that Scrooge notices the bells in this one before they start ringing. When before Marley comes to visit, like you can see them slowly moving before they start ringing, and he looks up and sees them. And it just adds a bit
it's
more
spooky.
tension. Yeah, adds a spooky tension that I quite enjoyed.
I was going to pitch it earlier. This might be, I think, the scariest version we've covered.
For kids, absolutely.
I agree. Minus 80s.
I think 80s is the one that can give it
Future.
competition. Yeah.
80s Future, I think, was more scary. But as a collective, this movie is definitely the most.
Grotesque isn't the word, but I don't know what the wording would be for just seeing skeletons.
I mean, it's
Morbid?
horror in a way, morbid.
Morbid, I guess that's I think that's a good word for it. This is a morbid version.
I mean, that was upon my research was an issue with this film was a lot of people didn't like it because of how dark it was. And I was going to say it while we were talking about how the injection of humor kind of damaged it. And I was just thinking, man, these people would have hated it even more if we got rid of a lot of the humor that didn't work in this and it was just more serious.
Yeah.
Me as a critic, I think I would have liked it more.
Yeah, because the humor stands out as a tonal difference is a problem. Because I would have rather than I would prefer commitment to tone than I do for preference of tone, if that makes sense. You can have a horror Christmas movie, I'll enjoy it. Yeah, I think
I mean, Violent Night.
Yeah, that's true. And there was the other one that we saw that was kind of a slaughterhouse Christmas thing.
Red Christmas.
Red Christmas, yeah.
We haven't covered that on the pod.
That's true.
Well, we didn't say we were covering on the pod.
Yeah.
No, but I gave Violent Night as an example of a connection.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can see that though, because I'm imagining like us, they took kids to see it because it's an animated kids movie in theory.
Yeah, made by the person who did Polar Express, which is probably how it was marketed.
Yeah. So yeah,
Prince, we haven't covered Polar Express.
Yeah. I can see that.
Don't I have egg on my face?
I can see why the reaction would be that way though, because it's a quote unquote more scary version of the story. I just say commit to your tone. That's the reason why I have issue with most of the comedy here, because a lot of this, I agree, is very much scary imagery. It's leaning a little bit into the horror aspect, and I'd rather keep that tone than kind of give it up.
Yeah, that's like I don't know, just the pitch of like a marketing, like, you know, you like Lord of the Rings, the guy who did Lord of the Rings, he made this movie, man. And you show the person brain dead.
Yeah. Pretty much. Love it.
Magnum opus on his first film. I don't know.
Some
Was Brain
would
Dead his
say.
first? I don't remember.
No.
It was an early one.
I got another point. I'll jump to.
Writer, yeah.
I love, you can see Tiny Tim's silhouette when Bob is sitting next to him, but you don't see the body.
Oh,
Yeah,
on
they
the
went
wall.
More
Yeah.
creative route with it.
Yeah. So like the body is there and you see the silhouette of it, but you don't actually see the body. I thought that was a great shot.
Yeah, it might be a little dark for a Disney film to show a dead kid. So, silhouette is probably the most they could get out of it.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
Disney's done movies where they've killed kids before.
They killed the cute animals in The Last Jedi. Do you remember? That's a Disney movie. Chewbacca was literally cooking one and eating one.
I don't like
Yeah,
porgs.
Yeah, no.
I was going to go to World's End when they hang a kid.
Oh, that's true. That's another
But
one.
you don't see the
You don't
dead kid
see
though.
it, but it's definitely implied.
I didn't say Disney isn't afraid to kill kids. It's they wouldn't show dead kids.
Yeah.
Unless you have an example for that. I don't. Nothing comes to mind for me.
Don't think I do have an example. Off the top of my head, anyway. I'd have to really think about it, but I'm leaning towards a no. I don't think I've seen it.
I'm trying to think of any, and nothing's coming to mind.
Arguably, Wanda tortures children.
Wow.
in WandaVision.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to leave their
let's
bedroom or whatever. We don't see them again.
Yeah, they're trapped in there.
Oh, Crimson, that movie you always bring up, that Disney, like, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Do kids die in that one?
No, but they do get
Okay.
tormented. Yeah.
I like that
something
Okay,
I want to hear Sprinks say is what he's about
Oh,
to say.
well, ooh, clever. I like that this movie touches on Scrooge's family with his sister.
Yes, and it does
A
support
lot
the
overlook
friend bits
that.
too. because of the connection. It's like I said, it's thinner, but it's there because of this sister connection.
Yeah.
Because past brings it up, and yeah, she still has like offspring in the world or something like that. I don't know what past says, but references Fred.
Yeah, she had a son, your nephew.
Yeah, they bring up Scrooge's dad, which it's not as in depth as the 80s one,
but it's
but
implied.
it is at least referenced here, which is good for his character.
Despite the inconsistencies.
Instead of it being completely open. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Something I'm on the fence on, so maybe you guys could sway me one way or another, but seeing Jacob Marley floating with the chains, and I know this happened in the Muppets one as well, but I didn't really consider it, is the chains are supposed to like weigh them down, the weight of their greed, the weight of their sins holding them down. But him flying around so effortlessly kind of just doesn't convey that at all. It's kind of contrary to what the point of the chains are.
It kind of feels like the lock boxes or the weights and the chains aren't.
Yeah, so it sounds like it feels like that he can fly within the range of the chains without, but then he has at some point has to move the lock boxes. So like
until he goes out the window, then he can fly everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying it's consistent. I'm saying that that's I think the idea behind it, like the idea that you have a stand for, you have a weight holding down a balloon kind of feeling to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I would agree with that
if not for him flying away. Thing. Yeah, I agree. Big problem.
Huge problem. Changes the movie.
Whoa.
I mean, it's a nick, but
not adjectives, adverbs.
We'll go with Sprinks again.
Oh, that's me. I guess just a little thing I like of I do really like this depiction of past, but being that past speaks so like a lot of breath
airy,
in their words, very airy. I like that because they're a flame and air gives them life. So their words are very airy.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's true. The way of reading it.
I think it was in the conversation between Marley and Scrooge. Marley doesn't like look at Scrooge for much of the conversation until he gets very serious, and then the eyes like inhumanly roll onto him. Very adds to the creep factor. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think the sounds for him as well, with the chains before entering the room and then chucking them through the door. I liked. Which this one was different. This one went through the door instead of unlocking and then opening the door. Like, was it 80s and 30s that did that, or was it just the 80s? I don't remember. I think they both just opened the door, right? In the 30s and 80s. This is the first one to go through the door.
Yeah, the door opens in the 80s one. So like then he walks through. So the door opens, nothing's there, and then he just appears.
Yes.
And then
the 30s one doesn't matter.
Yeah, 30s one he does walk
through the door.
Well,
the door opens in the 30s, conveying he walked through the door.
Yeah. And then we kind of follow him via Scrooge looking at him in that one, the Seymour Scrooge, because obviously we don't see that version of Marley.
And then the Muppets, they kind of just walk up the stairs, right? Or did they come to the door? I don't
Walk
remember.
is a strong word.
They float.
Yeah, you float up the stairs.
Yeah, they float up from hell.
Yeah. Let's see. What was it? Oh. Something I didn't really care for in this one, and I think it's kind of an added issue because of the intro scene with the Undertaker, which I really like that addition to this, is when Scrooge asks, "Who are you?" when he's like 2 feet in front of him. It's kind of not a good thing that we now know established that this Scrooge has seen dead Marley and knows what that looks like.
I
kind of just doesn't work.
It's a line that they're It feels like they're adapted from the book because every version of the film has
It
done
is.
that. But it doesn't work in this version because this Scrooge has seen this version of Marley, so he would at least suspect. So if he's going to ask the question, you got to change the tone a little bit.
They just needed to change
or the
who to what.
distance.
Yeah.
He's right in front of them too.
Yeah. Who to what?
Yeah,
Good
so-
suggestion. I'd be fine with that too.
Yeah. So that was a little writing nick there, just for this version that they set up for themselves. Do you guys prefer the Undertaker opening over the narrations that we've had before?
I like the Undertaker because it shows more of Scrooge's character in a show instead of tell.
It shows his greed.
A lot is
Yeah.
shown of this Scrooge, and I like it. It also shows that the only person who showed up, well, I guess only witness is needed, but the only person there for Marley was Scrooge. Kind of showing
Yeah.
that Marley didn't have a family.
Or he's also very much like Scrooge, just dedicated himself to the work. You know, like they just foregoed everything else.
Well, true, but no one, like no relatives or anyone's around there who would be there
Mhm.
for Marley.
Yeah, there's no family member to ID his body. It's his business partner. Which would answer a question that Sprinks posed in, I think it was the 80s one, of if Marley had family, because we didn't have any answer. This one might actually imply he didn't have a family, because Scrooge was the one to ID him instead of a family member.
Could be.
Um,
It also kind of conveys more into the charity workers that it's several years after the death of Marley that they don't even know Marley's dead. So
yeah,
that-
I mean, the
just
name's still on
to-
the sign.
yeah, but to just show more so how new they are to this town.
Yeah, they definitely knew around these parts. Something I complimented on the Muppets Carol was the detail to old stuff. I pointed out the books specifically. The paperwork that Scrooge signs in the beginning here was really good too. Sprinks, I know you and I have old checks
Oh, I know what you're talking
or documents, and a lot of those old ones had the starting year, so 18, and then a blank spot for you to fill in, and that was in this as well, instead of just a blank spot for the person to write. So it was a nice detail that they actually did an old document, and it was pretty authentic. Nice.
I honestly just stood up to go grab it. I have my document right here in my hands.
Ah, cool.
Neat.
Do you want to read off what it is or anything, since you nabbed it?
It is a States Copper Company capital stock certificate that is 400 shares of capital stock of copper
Yeah,
with
pretty cool.
a witness whereof of date of secretary and president. And it's from 1929.
And then I have an old check from 18 something that I can't get to right now. But it's cool. Good detail. I like they did that. Writer point.
I
Please.
like Bob and Emily's first conversation, as they usually do. It kind of plays out like most of the other versions we've covered, which is Tiny Tim, reminding people of who made blind people see and beggars walk, or whatever, cripples walk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that conversation between Bob and Emily, this one in comparison to the previous versions, it felt more like they were both knowingly lying to each other, if that makes sense. So like they both know the truth of Tiny Tim's health decline, but they're both accepting the lies that they're telling each other because they both want to believe the lie,
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of this version of the conversation that came across to me like.
This is my favorite version of that, because the other ones, when Bob's saying, "Oh, Timmy, he's doing better," he has the full-on happy face. You know he's faking it, but you can't really tell other than you just know. In this, you can see it. You can see that he's not believing in what he's saying,
And you can see that Emily
but
knows too.
he's just trying to keep it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do like how that's actually portrayed by Bob. Nice.
Yeah, good stuff. I like that Emily is also knows as well, but she's accepting the lie that Bob is trying to tell her and the rest of the family. For me, that's a good dynamic. They're both keeping up a front for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Strikes.
Shoot, I forget. Some known actor played Peter in this version. I think it's the guy who played Junie in Spy Kids.
Really? I
Maybe?
mean, Peter wasn't even a character in this, really.
No, but Danny, I think, is the actor, something like that. But he's in this film somewhere, and I think it was as Peter. I wrote in my notes when Scrooge is observing Fred's party, and then Fred says, it's Ebenezer Scrooge, and they're all laughing at him. I immediately wrote another cruel Fred, but then Fred gave his reasonings of Scrooge not accepting his invitation, and I went, you know what? An understandable and reasonable Fred.
Yeah. I like
Just
that.
like that.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, one of the things is like I pretty much did the same thing in my notes. Spring says like, all right, another cruel Fred, and then the scene continued on afterwards where he grew somber and like he didn't necessarily sober up, but he got more serious and explained to the party like how sad he actually is, and I'm like, all right, we're good.
Yeah, there are reasons for his feelings of what was happening at the party, and I'm like, you know what? That's believable.
Yeah,
good job.
So I do like that because it doesn't make Fred cruel; it just makes him sad that his uncle's not there.
Yeah,
he's getting his emotions out.
Now, we saw a little of it in the 80s, and it wasn't in the 30s or the Muppets. How do you two feel about ignorance and want in this one?
I was just about to bring that up as my next point. I really don't know, honestly. I still feel, I know it's book accurate, but it's just a weird thing to throw in both versions. It just stands out as being weird. I do like how they tried to creepify the kids, where they turn into a prisoner and a worker from the whatever, blanking on the name of it. But
a brothel,
and then
an asylum.
No, the workhouse, the workhouses.
Yeah.
And then yeah, she goes in a straitjacket. So I like how they tried to make them fearful for Scrooge, but it's just, I don't know. It's such a weird thing to throw into A Christmas Carol in general. I don't know.
The strange thing about it
to the book, and I like this more so because Scrooge actually points out the quote unquote claw under the robe compared to the 80s one, where the 80s one just reveals it.
Look beneath my robes.
Yeah. This one, I think it helps with the tone going into Yet to Come.
I can agree. It helps with the tone.
And there's not actually any physical danger to Scrooge. And it's not a full thing like the hearse with the horses or anything. It's just of what is conveyed from present of these two to keep in Scrooge's mind, which it does help, I think, for Scrooge's change.
It's interesting, because I think I'm okay with the kids. Like it is a weird thing to drop in. I think if I'm talking build up, I think 80s does it a little bit better, and the reason is because the implication is like they're the downtrodden of humanity, and we spend time with the poor folk in the 80s one, more time with the poor folk. Like we were with complete strangers, like a family just struggling to make ends meet on the street, like under a tunnel, just
under the bridge,
huddling near a fire. For me, that lends into like the sins humanity refuses to acknowledge, which for me lends into the kids. So I feel like the 80s one had better justification for the kids. That being said, I think this one is better fit for the tone, because they do play up the horror aspect, I think, to the film's benefit, to then play into the quiet of Ghostmakers' Future's arrival.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it much better. Right. I agree. I think the implementation in the 80s one is smoother, because we have a a lead into the reveal of them. This, it's just an observation. Oh, is that a foot or a hand down there, or a claw? Uh, and I feel like Scrooge also took more out of it in the '80s one. This one, it felt more of just fear and not the actual symbolism or messaging behind
Like you don't
want
feel
and
Yeah.
ignorance.
The '80s one had to go sit down and think about it.
Yeah. So I don't feel like this one left an impact on Scrooge like the '80s one did, but I do agree it is a tonal thing in this one.
To me, it does play off the feel of a nightmare kind of thing, with just how scary ignorance and want are to Scrooge. And as soon as they're gone, it's like waking from a nightmare and looking around, and you see something that looks like a form, which is his shadow on the ground.
I can see that. So, I like them both for different reasons. If I were to pick the better written implementation, I'm going with the '80s. Because that Scrooge goes on the journey of like being introduced to the woes of the world and how he's turned a blind eye. Where with this Scrooge, we doesn't really see his blind eye is more focused on Cratchit and not really anybody else up until that point.
Yeah, and the '80s one plays more into the character of that past being a more morally fixated change onto Scrooge's character.
Yeah.
Because if this Scrooge didn't see the claw or comment on it, I don't know if Present probably wouldn't have even revealed it. The clock would have struck and he would have died. Maybe while dying they were revealed, but
And if he did reveal it, it would feel shoehorned, like they had to check the
would.
box. Well, I mean, it kind of feels that way anyways, but it would be more so that it'd be like, open up, look at these weird kids, learn something. All right, I'm going to die now.
What a line of dialogue that would be in an abridged version of this film.
Yeah. I do like Present's death. It is gruesome, dark,
more so than
Yeah,
any other ones we've
and-
covered.
and scary. I could see a kid be actually scared from that death.
I agree. It's probably why I don't remember much of this film.
It gets to the point of kind of a realism because it's like an actual heart attack that someone could witness someone having. It's
Yeah,
not just
shriveling up
fading
and
off into
dying.
existence.
Yeah, it's not magical pixies dust or whatever.
It's not
Yeah, and the
magical.
Muppet
It's
one.
not magical Christmas bullshit. As we
Or fading in shadows from the '80s. I don't remember how the '30s one vanished. I think it just like faded to black, like a scene change, and they were gone.
Well, the '30s one was the fireplace, right? Or was it the '80s? One of them,
That
they
would
fade
have been
in
the
a
30s.
fireplace. So yeah, it just fades in the fireplace.
Well, '80s just
The
remember-
'80s
The
reveals
80s
two
just-
kids
80s
at
just
the
leaves.
bridge
Yeah,
and leaves.
Yeah, he just leaves.
It's part of the like traumatizing to change Scrooge bit because Scrooge is trying to bargain with nobody there, and when go sit down, goes to
Well,
sit
the
down
'80s
kind of
is
thing.
like, you're gonna take me back to my chambers, right? And then just
No.
yeah,
80s.
but this one's
best present.
spooky.
It's true. Yeah, I agree. It's very terrifying scene, and it speaks as to why a lot of people didn't like the film because it doesn't feel like it's made for kids with all those little horror, with all the
No,
horror injection.
it's got a little of that like Monster House kind of sense.
This is darker than Monster House, but I
It
get what
is,
you're trying
but-
to say.
Shoot, there was something I saw that was like for kids, and I'm like, that is not a kids movie. I can't remember what it was. Like some,
Maybe
well, not Soul.
No.
Like that's a movie that I go, I don't know if that's a kids movie, but that's not scary of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's more it's for its messaging.
Yeah, Solo
Yeah.
has a lot of surface level material that kids will enjoy, but it's one that you will appreciate the more you delve into the artistic experience.
I can't recall what it was, but
Here we go. Let's see. Springs brought that. Runner.
Yes. A little back and forth between Present and Scrooge. When he arrives, like, why are you bringing me to this? Like, I assume this poor beggar's house has something to do with me, and then it kind of zooms in on Scrooge as he says this, looking up at Present, and Present's like, yes, we're visiting the house of your assistant, Bob Cratchit, and then Scrooge looks crestfallen. I think that's the best point of which this Present back talks Scrooge a little bit, because I like when Present pushes Scrooge.
Yeah. And I think he also says the wages
Yeah.
of Bob, of like what he can afford
Yeah.
Yeah, the measly 15 shillings you're paying
a week, or
something
yeah.
like that. Yeah, I think this is my favorite intro to Bob's house, because the other versions, Scrooge is just like, where are we? He doesn't degrade the house and then wonder why he's there. This one, he degrades and asks. The others, he just asks. So I think it's a good addition.
The 80s one is just too convenient.
The walk.
The whole like just walking from the fence, turning a corner, and you're at Bob Cratchit's house.
I mean, that one was interpretive of what actually happened, but yeah. Let's see. I need more time to read my notes. Spranks, you're up.
There's a line where when Scrooge is so happy, to be alive, that he's out in the snow, he pays for the goose, gets him in a cab, he's still in his night clothes, or nightgown, and then he grabs onto another carriage just out of glee, and he says, Bob's your uncle and Fanny's your aunt, which I don't know if that's just a terminology, just word of the time period, but Bob would be related to Bob Cratchit, and isn't Scrooge's sister named Fanny? So then in context, like Fanny's your aunt, that would be onto his offspring who he doesn't have.
Honestly, it came across to me that Jim Carrey was just ad-libbing.
But the names were chosen of characters in the movie, which was weird.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't have that interpretation, but I can definitely see why you did.
And then he tumbles in the street, and the next scene he's closed. So he walked back home to change.
Yep.
Or just went shopping,
Just
clothes
shopping.
on the fly.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I assume he went. I assume he went home to get his clothes. But yeah,
Probably.
That's probably what happened. It's a bookend, or at least they intended as a bookend, because we see him saying "Bah humbug" as he's watching kids do the same thing, like 7 Christmas Eves ago at the very beginning of the film, as he's walking away from Marley's thing. So I know why this is here, and it kind of fits with this more gleeful Scrooge. I think they could have tweaked it a little bit to make it better.
I think it could have been a little tweaked, but I also like that this is kind of Scrooge's ice skating moment that Bob has.
Yeah.
Also, a line, I think he says it to the charity worker when he sees him again, and whispers the total in his ear. And he says, not a farthing less. This is a version that didn't say penny.
It's true, so we don't have an inconsistency problem. Isn't that nice?
There is no word of penny in this. There is tuppence, shillings, half a crown. This is the right currency throughout this film.
Good job, writers.
Yeah. So we're at 50-50 with Christmas carols.
Yeah. I went very good.
Yeah.
And I like that how put off the charity worker is when he first sees Scrooge. Like, he wants to walk away, and then Scrooge, kind of...
Well, yeah, as we touched on, you didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
Scrooge had to get to him.
And it plays in again. I love that scene because we essentially stay with the charity worker's POV as he watches Scrooge join the carolers for the end bit that they're quieting for. It's very much a quiet shock thing, which I like. It's in quite the contrast to Bob. Like, I think this works for this character.
Yeah, I wish we knew how much he gave the carolers. I know, I don't know how they would shoehorn it in, but it was so much for them to stop caroling and move on. Like it set them up for a while, that one coin. But I don't think they could integrate it, but it would be nice to know.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystery amount that has been consistent in every version so far. uh, how much, not in terms of currency, but do you guys think he's offered enough to like buy a house or less? Let's do it in metrics of purchasing power. How much do you think he's offered?
For Bob's wage?
No,
Like, to
for
the charity workers?
charity.
Oh.
Do you think he gave enough to like buy a horse, a carriage, a piece of property? How generous do you think this donation is? Because it is completely speculative and unknown.
I have not
From
even
all
faintest
the
idea.
versions, I think it's a hefty amount. I don't know if it's enough for a house, but I also
This-
don't know the inflation rate or the change of
This
British
is-
currency of the time and everything. I
Oh,
don't know if
that's
it's
why I'm
like
like,
a
in terms of
5-figure thing is
property.
insane to say, or
Yeah, this is an interesting thing to say. I would be able to better guess and theorize if I knew the wealth that Scrooge had.
the wealth
That's
I
true,
know
we
he
don't know
has
how
is
rich he
giving
is.
away half a crowns to nobodies.
Yeah. So I
But that is a
imagine
changed
it's,
man of
I,
the
I, ima-
day.
I imagine it's a hefty amount, but I think my guesses would be based around the amount of wealth that he actually has and the amount of wealth he's been willing to give away. Because, like, one thing you can say about the Muppets version, he's willing to pay off Bob's entire mortgage and raise his
That's
wage.
true.
So, like, you get a good sense of, like, oh wow, he actually is, like, in
Plus
that
whatever
line.
he said to the charity workers in that one.
Yeah, plus whatever he sent to the charity workers in that one. So you get a sense of like, okay, he is very immensely wealthy, absurdly so, in the sense that he's willing to pay off somebody's house. Whereas here we don't really get the sense of like the extra giveaway stuff that's like hard, like in a hard concrete way, to kind of contrast for this particular Scrooge. So my guess is a hefty amount, but I can't really get definitive until we get really based into the Scrooge's wealth. Like with the Muppets version, I could venture a guess. It probably is the worth of a house because that's so easy for him to do. So maybe even more than that. Based
What
on
they
that
do
version
well
of
with
Scrooge.
Scrooge is, throughout all 4 of these, is Scrooge isn't one to flaunt his wealth. He's one who just
Hoards it.
likes to hoard it, and accumulate more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that does help, but I think
Because even in his own housing, I think it's portrayed in all 4 of these. I think Muppets one I saw the clearest, but when he's having like his porridge by the fire, it's a small fire and he's very close to it. It's not warming the whole room he's in,
Yeah,
even though
he's
that's
cheap
for
about
only
his
himself.
belongings. Yeah, he's a minimal man to reduce cost. Because I pointed out in it was also Muppets that they talk. Was it Muppets? Nah, well, it was 80s or Muppets, one of the two. They talked about the cost of darkness and
Oh,
that,
Muppets. Darkness is
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah,
Charles Dickens says it to the camera.
I liked that integration for that. So, for his minimal lifestyle, even in his own home.
Does it also help with the one scene in this film where he opens up the side room and everything's covered in blankets, like
see that
he doesn't use the house?
Yeah. It does.
Yeah, he's a simple man.
So some pleasures.
By the way, Crimson, now I am pretty darn empty of notes.
Pretty darn empty. What about you, Ryder?
I am pretty much on empty as well. I can give it another last look through. Let's
Okay.
see.
The turkey is about the size of the kid, so that one wasn't too far off. Since we've observed
Yeah, but
every
it's not
time
double the
how large.
size.
Well, they didn't say double the size in this version.
Is that the one as big as me?
Yeah. Each version, well, not each. There's been different variations on what the descriptor for this turkey's been. The one was like, is it as big as Tim? Is it twice as big? Is it as big as this kid? They've had different versions of
Oh,
scaling.
this one said turkey, right?
Yes, prize turkey.
Okay, because the other 3 have been goose.
The goose is what the Cratchits have on their own. Scrooge buys turkeys.
It's been consistently turkey, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Scrooge buys turkeys because they are more expensive than goose.
Yeah. I do like the line in this one where they unveil the goose and they're like, maybe someday we'll have a turkey.
Yeah, that was a good addition. But then for you, it's unfortunate that there's no reveal of their reaction to getting a turkey. That actually is a negative, that they have a line wanting a turkey and we don't see them getting one.
The 80s and the Muppets have it. The 30s didn't, and this one doesn't.
The addition of the line of wanting a turkey and then them getting it without us seeing it, though, the line actually made it worse.
Also, is it somewhat... One could definitely see different avenues to this, but at the end when Bob is now narrating to the camera, fourth wall break, and it goes to Scrooge with Tim on his shoulder, and the street gets more Christmasified with like tinsel and wreaths. Is that to convey the next Christmas?
It could be
because it would be
1, 2,
weird if
3.
it's decorated after Christmas Day to decorate the streets.
It could be.
But is that also to show? Okay, but is that also to show that Scrooge is now contributing wealth to the town?
It might just
and
be.
That's why it's there now.
Well, the interesting thing, right, as I tie this back to the world building a bit in the opening, is because we see the town celebrating Christmas time, and then when we arrive at the Scrooge's and Marley's street, we can see like kids are avoiding the street, like that the whole block is empty. So like when we see the kids that are playing on the street, they turn the corner, they see Scrooge and immediately run back. So like they know to avoid that whole block because of Scrooge. So I think the implication is that now that Scrooge is a changed man, the town can party there without like receiving his ire.
Oh, okay. So Scrooge's reputation is so large it stops city decorators?
Just in that block.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be seen that way. Yeah, that's a good read. I would prefer to see Tim walking and not on Scrooge's shoulders to convey that he's actually gotten better.
I guess so, but he isn't
We
carrying
have
a
that
crutch.
in other versions. He doesn't need a crutch if he's on someone's shoulder.
Well,
which
true,
is why I'm
but
like,
I mean,
it's not a definitive show that
that
he's
is
improved.
Yes, but that is kind of conveying that Scrooge is going to carry him the whole time. If he's like, okay, tired and sets him down, he doesn't have the crutch. Tim doesn't have the crutch.
I mean, if we're to believe it's this street, it's not probably too far because Bob walks home. So
Okay,
I just think it would have been a better
Muppets
visual
one.
if he walked or ran.
Yeah.
Like other versions we've had.
However, the Muppets one, when Tiny Tim's on Bob's shoulder, in that one, he's holding his crutch, implying he still needs it. But then again, that's in the present, not the future.
Yeah. The ending.
Huh. I just realized something that I want to talk about off the podcast with you guys.
Write it down.
Well, that's a tease.
Yeah, I know, right? So my last note is actually the fear factor for Scrooge when he goes to visit Fred, because Scrooge saw him like what the butt end of the joke is supposed to be. So it takes more for him to kind of find the courage to open the door, you know?
Yeah.
So
he even conveys to the maid there, it's like, I'm his uncle. Like hesitantly. Like she might not even recognize his name.
Yeah. And then I think it's just a very powerful scene just to hear him listening into the conversation first before he enters the door. And then we've praised everything else about how small he is and him wanting to promise to throw the next party at his house next year to give his house some life, which is, I think, all really good bits I really love.
You know, Ryder, I think you've pushed me over the edge a little. I think I'll say that's my favorite scene in the movie.
Oh, nice.
Overhearing?
Yeah, just Scrooge going to Fred's for the invitation.
It's a powerful scene in a lot of the films, and I think it might be one of my favorites here as well.
The action portrayal is real good. The camera work shot of Scrooge looking small and Fred looking big, real good. And then when he's accepted, they're all like equal leveling. I think it's very well done.
Frank, so how does this convey with going to Bob's for Muppets? Because you threw out all of them and being like, I don't like that it ends with Fred. It's better if he ends with Bob's family. You said you really like the Fred ending here. How does
do?
this match with the Muppets one?
Oh, Muppets one's better.
Okay.
I think Scrooge
between
saying he cares for Tiny Tim and is like a second father to him and everything. Scrooge needs to have a presence of Tiny Tim. And in the Muppets, that is a thing. Now, it does help in this one that it ends with Scrooge with Tiny Tim, showing that it's also a possibility here that aids to it. But then there's no Cratchit connection of the family.
seeing how they fared. I think the last thing I've got, and it kind of goes back to a thing I brought up earlier with them not having a Cole talk like the others. Seeing the or Scrooge telling them to get Cole felt less impactful, even though I acknowledge they exchanged glances in the beginning, so Scrooge did know he was cold. I feel like this payoff of go get some coal was lessened by them not conversing about coal like the other ones.
I can agree with that. Like,
Yeah,
we kind of had a back and forth about that.
comparatively.
I think comparatively,
But I still think it's a good payoff.
It's fine in this, but comparatively it seems lacking because the others, I think, have a better setup for it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement, I guess. I don't really have much to comment on it other than what I already said. So.
Yeah. All right, I guess that's it. Unless someone found anything out of nowhere.
Oh my gosh! Last thing I like that they kept the actual book connection of being boiled in your own pudding, because they keep changing that adaptation or change that writing because I guess people don't know what that means of a Christmas pudding.
Okay. Well, I guess that takes us to our ratings. It'll be very exciting. We'll start with writer.
All right. My subjective for this one was pretty set to go in. I kind of knew where I sat on it. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I like the animation medium a lot, but I think this film is bogged down by needless fluff, and that bothers the crap out of me. And the fact that breached into my subjective as well is just, I guess, a testament to how much of it felt like wasting time when it could have been better supporting like the characters or something more entertaining and or make the jokes land better. The comedy didn't really work for me in this film either, which is kind of another nick for me. Subjectively, I'm at a 5. This is probably my least favorite Christmas Carol that we've covered so far. Objectively, oh man, where do I begin? So the plot, funny enough, is like the Christmas Carol films. What drags it down is the overblown fluff, as I mentioned. So we waste absurd amounts of time following the carriage, like in the carriage chase. We waste arguably an absurd amount of time with the additional flight sequences or the getting blasted off rocket into the sky. I view a lot of that as like, I don't know why this is here other than just as filler. And the problem is it's not even filler that adds to the characters typically. It's just to show off the visual medium of animation. Because you can argue that the whole breaking the to break the room into like the observation room to give us the heavenly view arguably also takes up a lot of time. And that's time that could have been spent building characters and stuff like that. So the plot, I would say, is okay in terms of its pacing. I do think there's a lot of time wasted. I think that there's plot armor. It's kind of talked about of how this Scrooge survives. He's an old man and he gets thrown about. And this Scrooge has a lot of stamina, which can work. It's a worry because I do have to add the caveat of plot armor just because he's an old man who slipped on stairs, icy stairs, and they fell off the bed head first. So there is a little bit there. So it's not a huge nick, but it's a nick nonetheless. The world building I think is mostly excellent as pertains to the grounded bits of how the world functions. The world building is also equally damaged by the introduction of how the ghosts potentially function in this world, how the spirits aren't consistent with themselves, and uh, in terms of their abilities, and then the what was it called? There was another thing I'm missing at first. The world building. Oh, the dancing. There we go. Which kind of contrasts again with a lot of the realism aspect. So the world building isn't consistent with it itself. Like they don't have the realism tone for the real stuff that's happening, and the magical stuff isn't consistent with itself either, which is a bit of a problem. Um, and that leads us to characters. I think it's been said a lot. There's the Scrooge gets a lot of screen time, and because of that, the inconsistencies with him become more obvious. There are times where he wouldn't be caring about the poor because he hasn't been changed yet, which makes this feel like the Scrooge 180s at certain points when he's just suddenly supposed to be changed. And it's not to take away, I guess, some of the stronger aspects to the character as well. There are some excellent moments where that would develop Scrooge as a character, like looking at Bob's face on the staircase while Bob is mourning a child. Like that would affect him. So it's not one way. It's not all bad. There is good here. This also ties into most of the other characters here. Like I think this has my favorite Belle scene in isolation in terms of conversation, or one of my favorite Belle scenes. But again, there's no setup for it. So again, it kind of almost equals out, like it neutrals out. And that ties into Bob as well. I think there is stuff for Bob here that works functionally well, but this Bob also suffers from missing important conversations that would develop his character, because if this is the first version of Christmas Carol you're watching, you wouldn't get the Cole bit at all, and you wouldn't get the importance of how that's supposed to develop into the character's function and stuff like that. There are other bits of where the characters overall, I think, are more hollow, and that definitely is what damages the film a little bit for me. It's not a bad film, but I think there's enough wrong with how the writing in terms of the characters, the consistency of the world building, the plot, that this is on the lower end of my average scale for me. I'm at a 4.5, objectively.
All right, Sprinks, you can go next.
Oh boy, number 2. Let's start with subjective. I think I've been a little hard on this movie over the years. As a kid, I don't think I really appreciated all the craft that went into it and all the makings of it, and just how pretty good it is. Subjectively, I have it as 7.5. I enjoyed it. I think it was fun. The comedy and the tone shifts are kind of the nitpicks of me for enjoyment, and that's about it. Objectively, I think the acting's pretty darn good. I think it's casted really darn good. I think the mocap is decently done. I think the animation is certainly a subjective look. Some people don't like the uncanny look, and some do. To me, in subjectivity, it's neutral. That's fine for me. And objectively, the animation, I think what Crimson said of, was it overused or underused or normally used? I think there are aspects where they did things because they had the animation to do so, which came filler, but some was book connected. Gosh, if I just read the book before and prepped, I would know like a 1-to-1 a lot more than going off of memory. So I don't know how much is just bullshit made up stuff and how much is true. I think the Hearst stuff is pretty made up, but I don't know. It's always hard for animation. I say it all the time. So like lighting, there's some good lighting, but it's made that way. Cinematography, there's some good shots made, but they're able to make it that way, which is, I guess, how I saw the animation being used more so of like shots they could do where it would be near impossible unless it's like a full stage set in a way just for a camera angle kind of thing, or a camera is like designed in a such a, like an extremely tiny camera to get a shot in or something like that. So animation makes it easier for that. Let's see, the writing pretty stuck to the book, I think, which made some things confusing because of how it's written from the book of the 1800s. Shoot, I always forget something. Costuming doesn't exactly exist, but what they have them in is fine. Yeah, it's very similar to the 35 version we saw, the first one, but it has some things I like more and some things I like less in the making of the film. So I think I have it kind of neutrally still set as an 8.5.
Okay, I shall go next, and I will go with my subjective as well. I think this is my least favorite. Well, I know this is my least favorite of what we've covered so far. Never mind. I take that back. I forgot Muppets.
Can you not lie?
I enjoy this more than Muppets. Amended. I'm giving this 5.5. It's okay. I don't, much like Ryder, the humor didn't hit me. The filler scenes, like the carriage, the ghost carriage stuff, really took me out of it because it was providing nothing for me. So, and I don't know, it was okay, middle lane movie. Objective. This one just certainly, for me, had a lot more errors than the previous iterations that we had covered. There was the animation of like the footsteps in the snow, very minor, but it's a nick, something to throw out there that happened. The ghosts being revealed as a thing now, whether or not it's book accurate doesn't really matter to me because it's how it's portrayed within this film that we're covering. So if it's Marley revealing the ghost for Scrooge, why can't other ghosts reveal themselves to other people? Uh, why is Marley special if he's the only one that can do it? There's no answers. So the ghost thing is just an issue, whichever way you cut it for me. I do like the animation style. I say that in a subjective manner, but I mean it was well done in an objective sense. They did a lot of research for being era accurate for wardrobe, locations, props. I referenced the document at the Undertaker area. It's good. They added more potentially with Marley with the removing the coins from the eyes thing. They didn't really dive into it as being a reason, but one could read into it. So it's nice to see that. The "Who are you" line from Scrooge to Marley, I pointed out that's kind of dumb with the context of the Undertaker thing. Now that he's seen his body, it's established. Kind of not great, even if it's adapted from the book. Scrooge cared too early. One for Tim, two for just people in general because the bakery scene. Sprinks brought up how the bakery scene could be better if it was placed after Fred and Bob's. I think that would make it better, but as it is currently being the first in the... Oh, am I misrepresenting?
I don't want you to put full words in my mouth. I meant in context of Scrooge giving more care to it.
Yes, if it was placed later, his care would make sense. Is that what you're going for?
Yes, not that I would prefer it that way. That's how you worded it.
Okay. Well, going with that angle, I would prefer it. With what we have now, it being in front of everything else, and with the past not really having get any moments to grow to care of others, because the past was pretty much all about himself, there's no reason he would ask about the poor people and the bread and question present on why shops are closed on Sundays, stuff like that. He wouldn't care. I don't think Scrooge is curious either as a character trait. Fred had a good introduction, good ending, good bookend with the not bookend, but payoff with the game. His middle area was rushed compared to previous iterations, and I do think it's a little damaging here in isolation because it feels rushed for pacing. Scrooge is just inconsistent, especially compared to the others, where all the others have been a gradual. You can tell he's growing as a person, but in this, you don't feel it. It doesn't feel like a gradual incline or anything like that. You just get little steps of, oop, something's different, but it's not steady. And boy, am I rambling the heck out of this. But I'm giving this an objective 6. There's plenty wrong, but there's other stuff that hold it up: the camera work, the animation, voice acting. So all that is good. I'm Crimson Maroon.
And I'm Springs.
Bah humbug.
I wasn't prepared. Toodaloo.